Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you choosing to spend your time with this video, whether you're here to unwind, to learn something new, or simply to enjoy a moment of calm. If you find these peaceful history documentaries relaxing or helpful, please consider subscribing and giving the video a like. It supports the channel more than you know and helps these tranquil journeys reach others who may need them as well. Now, take a deep breath, settle in, and enjoy the story. The Gateway to 1348. Before you settle in completely, before you let your eyes close and your breathing slow, I want you to know something. Tonight, we're going somewhere extraordinary. Somewhere dark, certainly. Somewhere grim, without question. But also somewhere deeply human, richly textured, and strangely comforting in its own peculiar way. Tonight, you're going to experience life during the Black Death. Not as a noble, safe in a country manor, watching the world through lead-painted windows. Not as a wealthy merchant who could flee to the countryside at the first whisper of pestilence, riding a fast horse away from the city gates. No, tonight you are among the many. You are poor. You live in a city, a place of narrow alleys, leaning timber houses, and the constant, low hum of humanity. The year is somewhere around 1348, give or take, when the greatest catastrophe in European history is unfolding around you, one slow, terrible day at a time. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This doesn't sound particularly relaxing. A world of shadows and sickness. But here's the thing. There's something oddly soothing about stepping so far outside our modern world. There is a peace in the ancient. By inhabiting a time so completely different from our own, the sharp edges of the modern day begin to soften. The blue light of your phone, the hum of the refrigerator, the concerns of tomorrow morning, the emails waiting, the appointments pending, all of it becomes impossibly distant. Those worries cannot follow you back 700 years. They melt away, replaced by the flickering light of a tallow candle and the sound of a distant bell tolling in a stone tower. In 1348, the world is smaller. It is quieter. It is lit by fire and governed by the stars. Instead of your modern stresses, you find yourself worrying about the simpler, heavier things, whether the well water might be poisoned by a bad moon, or whether that cough you heard from the next room, muffled by a thin lath and plaster wall, means something terrible. These are old fears, primal fears. And in facing them from the safety of your bed, your own world starts to feel very quiet, very secure, and very far away. So settle in. Feel the weight of your blankets. Imagine them as heavy wool, woven by hand. Adjust your pillow. Let your shoulders drop, releasing the tension you've been carrying since the sun was up. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the cool air enter your lungs. Good. Another one. Imagine the air smells of wood smoke and old stone. Excellent. You are safe. You are just a traveler in time. The world before, an ordinary, terrible life. The year is 1348. The place is a city. Let's imagine it together. Perhaps it's somewhere in England, like York, with its winding stone streets and the looming presence of the Minster, or Bristol, with the salt air blowing off the Severn. Or maybe it's France, in the crowded, sun-drenched alleys near the docks of Marseille, where the masts of merchant ships sway like a forest of bare trees against the Mediterranean sky. The exact location doesn't matter terribly much, because in many ways, the experience is remarkably similar across Europe. You are poor, which is to say you are like the vast majority of people living at this time. You are the heartbeat of the world, one of the 80 or 90% of the population who works with their hands and lives by the rhythm of the sun. And the Black Death, the plague, the pestis, the great mortality, it's coming. It's a shadow moving across the map, invisible and silent. Or perhaps it's already here, a quiet guest in a house 3 streets over, depending on which month we've dropped you into. Either way, your life is about to become very interesting indeed. In the worst possible way, naturally. But for now, that shadow is still just a rumor, a story told by a frightened sailor or a traveling friar. Let's start before all that. Let's begin with an ordinary day, before the world changed forever. Close your eyes now if you haven't already. Really see the room around you. Picture this. You wake before dawn. The world is a palette of deep blues and charcoal grays. You don't wake because you want to, but because the world demands it. The rooster in a neighbor's yard has been crowing, a raw, repetitive sound that pierces the heavy silence of the pre-dawn hours. Your body feels heavy. Your back hurts from the straw mattress, a coarse linen sack stuffed with dried stalks that have flattened over months of use. You aren't alone. You share this space with 3 other family members. You can hear their rhythmic whistling breaths in the dark. You feel the collective warmth of their bodies, a small comfort against the damp cold that has seeped through the walls and under the thin, itchy wool blanket you've pulled up to your chin. The air in the room is thick. It smells of wood smoke from last night's dying embers, the faint, earthy scent of the straw beneath you, and the lingering aroma of the vegetable pottage that sat in the iron pot over the hearth. It's not a bad smell. It's the smell of home. It's the smell of survival. Outside, the city is beginning to stir. You hear the distant clatter of a wooden shutter being pushed open, the ring of a blacksmith's hammer beginning his early work, and the soft, rhythmic scritch-scritch of a broom on a dirt floor. The day is beginning, and for now, it is a day like any other. The anatomy of a medieval home. It's always cold, or so it seems. Even in the height of summer, the stone and timber of your home seem to hold on to the dampness, a deep-seated chill that lives in the very bones of the building. Your house? Well, calling it a house is generous. It's more of a room, really. One small, cramped space on the ground floor of a timber frame building. Above you, another family lives. Below you, the very earth. The building leans slightly to the left, a skeletal structure of oak beams that looks as if it's contemplating whether to finally collapse, but hasn't quite made up its mind yet. It has stood for 80 years. It might stand for 80 more. The walls are wattle and daub. If you ran your hand over them in the dark, you would feel the uneven ridges of woven willow sticks, the wattle, hidden beneath the daub. That thick, dried mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. Yes, dung. It sounds unpleasant to our modern ears, but here, it is simply a tool of survival. It works surprisingly well as an insulator, a heavy earthen shield against the wind. But even this shield is imperfect. There are narrow gaps in the walls where the daub has cracked over time, tiny fissures where you can see the pre-daylight, that soft, charcoal gray suggestion that morning is thinking about happening. A thin, ghostly finger of mist might curl through one of those cracks, dissolving into the room's shadows. Beneath you, the floor is not wood or stone, but packed earth, beaten down by the feet of generations, until it is as hard as iron. To keep the damp at bay, rushes have been scattered across it in a thick, golden brown carpet. When things are good, you might have mixed in some dried herbs, sweet flag or lavender if you're lucky, though for someone of your station, that is a rare, fragrant luxury. More often, it's just the rushes, slowly decomposing into a soft, springy mulch, mixed with the bits of bone, gristle, and mud tracked in on your heavy leather shoes. The smell is, well, organic is one word for it. It is the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, sweet, sour smell of fermentation. Medieval is probably more accurate. It is a heavy, settled smell. It is the smell of a world that is ancient, slow, and very, very still. Listen to the house. The wood groans as it settles in the morning air. A mouse rustles in the thatch or the rushes, a tiny, rhythmic sound that feels strangely companionable in the dark. This is your world. Small, dim, and quiet. You share this space with your wife and 2 children. You can hear their soft, shallow breathing in the darkness, a reminder of the life that fills this small square of the world. Your mother lived with you too, until last winter. She sat in the corner by the fire, her hands never idle, until the deep, biting cold of February took her. That happens. In 1348, death is not a stranger who breaks down the door. It is a neighbor who is always leaning against the fence. People are always departing, taken by the cold, a sudden fever, the flux, an accidental fall, or the slow, gnawing ache of hunger when the grain stores run low. Death is as common as the rain that drums against your roof, and to your mind, it is about as remarkable. It is simply a part of the landscape, a shadow that walks beside you from the moment you are born. You grieve, of course, but the grief is quiet, folded into the chores of the day. In the center of the room lies the hearth. It is the heart of your home, though it is nothing more than a few blackened stones arranged in a circle on the dirt floor. There is a hole in the roof directly above it, a small patch of sky visible through the thick layers of thatch. You watch that hole now. It's a dim gray eye looking down at you. You reach out to stir the embers of last night's fire. A few orange sparks dance upward, swirling in the draft. You add a bit of peat, or a few precious scraps of wood, and the smoke begins to rise. But the smoke doesn't simply leave. It doesn't find the hole in the roof right away. Instead, it lingers. It is a slow, lazy ghost that wanders through the room first. It curls around the heavy timber beams and clings to the underside of the thatch, coating every surface in a fine, velvety layer of soot. It stings your eyes, a sharp, familiar bite, before eventually meandering toward the opening in the roof. Your eyes water constantly. A thin veil of moisture is your permanent companion. Everyone's eyes are the same. It is the mark of the city dweller, the mark of the poor. You barely notice the sting anymore. It is just the price of warmth. You watch the smoke drift, its movement rhythmic and slow, hypnotic in the pre-dawn light. It rises in ribbons, gray against gray, curling and twisting, until it finally finds the cold air of the outside world and vanishes into the sky. The fire's out now. The stones of the hearth have gone cold and gray, and though you crave the warmth, it is too early to start it. Fuel is a luxury, a currency of its own that you don't really have to spare. Wood isn't free, despite what a traveler from the distant past might think. The common lands, the forests and fields where generations of your ancestors gathered fallen branches, are becoming more restricted, hemmed in by invisible lines of law and ownership. The lord who owns the land around the city has opinions about who can take what, and those opinions are enforced by foresters and settled with fees you cannot afford. So you lie there in the pre-dawn darkness, draped in that heavy, itchy wool, feeling the cold air press against your cheeks. You listen to your husband's breathing. He's already awake too. You can tell by the subtle shift in his rhythm, the way his breath hitches slightly as he prepares his mind for the strain of the day. You don't speak yet. In the dark, there is a quiet understanding, a shared moment of stillness before the struggle begins. You think about the day ahead, a mental map of the city forming in your mind. Your husband is a laborer. His value is measured in the strength of his back and the calluses on his palms. Some days he is at the docks, his boots slick with river mud as he hauls heavy crates of wine or wool from the bellies of creaking ships. Other days, he is a shadow on a scaffolding, mixing gritty mortar or lugging hewn stones for a new church wall. And then there are the quiet days, the lean days, when he stands in the square with dozens of other men, eyes searching for a foreman's nod that never comes. Your own day is a tapestry of small, tireless tasks. You take in spinning when the merchant grants you a bundle of raw, greasy wool. You feel the rhythmic whir of the spindle in your fingers, a motion so familiar you could do it in your sleep. Or you walk to the better part of town, where the houses are made of stone and the air smells of imported spices, to scrub the linens of a merchant's family until your knuckles are raw and red. The children are already part of this machinery. Your son is 9, your daughter 7. In your mind, you see them darting through the crowds like sparrows, carrying messages through winding alleys, or standing for hours in the market to chase birds away from the grain stalls. Their reward is a crust of hard rye bread or a single small coin that disappears into the family pot. This is the circle. This was your father's life, and his father's before him. It is a path worn deep into the earth by 1,000 years of footsteps. It will be your children's life too, assuming they survive to adulthood, a thought you hold with a cautious, guarded heart. Of the 5 children you bore, 3 have already returned to the earth, taken before their 3rd birthdays. In 1348, this is not a tragedy to be shouted from the rooftops. It is a quiet fact of nature. This is simply how things are. The world turns, the sun rises, and the work remains. The city wakes in the sludge. Take a breath, slow and steady. Feel the contrast between the world of 1348 and your own. Feel yourself sinking deeper into your bed, your comfortable, modern bed, with its clean sheets and soft support. It is an unimaginable luxury, a miracle of engineering that would be a king's ransom to the person whose life you are inhabiting. As you lie there, the city begins to stir around you. It's not a sudden roar, but a slow, mechanical awakening. You hear the heavy thud-clack of wooden shutters being thrown open, the hollow clatter of iron pots being dragged across stone, and the low murmur of voices rising like steam through the floorboards. In the next dwelling over, separated by a wall of thin wood and dried mud, someone is coughing. It's a dry, rattling sound that has been going on for weeks. You hear it every morning, as regular as the church bells. You try not to think about it. In this city, people are always coughing. Between the constant haze of wood smoke, the creeping damp of the river, and the biting winter cold, everyone's lungs sound like gravel rattling in a wooden box. It is simply the sound of the neighborhood. It is the sound of breathing. The street outside your door is narrow, a thin, jagged vein of space between leaning buildings. If you were to lean out of your window, which has no glass, only heavy wooden shutters to keep out the night air, you could nearly touch the building opposite. You could reach out and feel the rough-hewn timber of your neighbor's home. These streets weren't designed. They grew, twisting and turning organically over centuries. There is no grid here, no master plan. The city is a living thing that multiplied like rabbits, buildings leaning over the paths until the sky above is reduced to a thin ribbon of gray. It is a maze of lightless alleys, secret passages, and sudden dead ends that trap the shadows long after the sun has risen. The street beneath those shadows isn't paved. In the grand squares or near the cathedral, there might be cobblestones, worn smooth by a million footsteps. But your street is just the earth itself. It is a thick, dark soup of refuse, and the contents of chamber pots emptied from upper windows, a ritual of the morning you've learned to listen for. It is mixed with the waste of the pigs and chickens that wander freely, scavenging for scraps, and water that has nowhere to drain. This creates a permanent sludge, a heavy, viscous carpet that ranges from merely unpleasant to truly spectacular depending on the rain. It has a life of its own. It muffles the sound of footsteps, turning the walk of your neighbors into a soft, rhythmic squelch. As the city wakes, the air begins to thicken with the scent of this earth, sharp, metallic, and ancient. It is the smell of the city, and to you, it simply smells like the start of another day. When it rains, your street is transformed into a slow-moving river of filth, a dark sludge that clings to everything it touches. But when it's dry, the world doesn't become cleaner. It just becomes different. The mud bakes into a fine, powdery dust that rises with every footstep, every passing cart. It becomes a ghost that follows you everywhere. It coats your throat, settles in the deep tangles of your hair, and finds its way into every bowl of food. There is no escape from it. There is no good option. To navigate this terrain, you wear wooden pattens, clunky, elevated platforms strapped to your leather shoes to lift you a few inches above the worst of the muck. You can hear the rhythmic clack thud of the wood hitting the ground as you walk. But even with these, your feet are never truly dry. The dampness is a constant companion, a creeping chill that starts at your toes and settles in your bones. And the smell is persistent. It is the very breath of the city. Let that smell fill your imagination now. Don't recoil from it. Simply observe it as a fact of this world, a heavy blanket of atmosphere. It is a complicated, layered thing. At the base, there is the sharp, acidic tang of human and animal waste. Above that, the sweet, cloying scent of rotting vegetables and discarded offal from the butcher's stalls, fermenting in the sun. Then come the industrious smells. The thick, oily smoke from 1,000 small hearths, the scent of damp, unwashed wool, and the distant, biting stench of the tanneries, where hides are soaked in vats of urine to make them soft. Somewhere, a brewery is at work, adding a heavy, sour, sweet cloud of fermenting grain to the mix. It is a thick, textured air, an air you can almost taste. But here's the strange thing, you don't really notice it. Not most of the time. To you, this is simply the scent of home. It is the smell of humanity, of survival, of life being lived in close quarters. It is only on those rare, precious occasions when you leave the city walls, perhaps to gather herbs or to visit a relative in a nearby village, that the world changes. When you step out into the open countryside, the air is extraordinary. It is clean, almost shocking in its emptiness. It doesn't cling to you. It flows past you. It smells of nothing but green grass, wet earth, and the cold high sky. It feels thin and light in your lungs, so different from the heavy, seasoned air of the city that it almost makes you feel lightheaded. You stand there for a moment, breathing in that silence, before the city calls you back to its crowded, familiar embrace. Your stomach growls, a low, hollow reminder of the night's fast. It is a familiar sensation, a constant, quiet companion that stays with you from the moment you wake until you close your eyes at night. You aren't starving, not exactly, but you're never quite full either. You live in that perpetual, gray middle ground, where hunger is simply a background noise, like the wind or the rain, or the green noise. Breakfast today, as it is most days, will be pottage. You move to the hearth, where the iron pot hangs on its soot-blackened hook. It contains a thick, slow-moving soup of whatever you could gather. Oats to give it body, some wilted leeks or onions if they were cheap at the stall yesterday, and perhaps a few crusts of old hard bread to soak up the liquid. Meat is a Sunday luxury, a distant dream that exists more in memory than in reality. And even when you have it, it is more of a rumor of meat, a gristly bone with a few stubborn scraps clinging to it, boiled and reboiled until it finally surrenders whatever flavor it once possessed. You eat slowly, scraping the bottom of the wooden bowl, savoring the warmth more than the taste. It is heavy, earthy, and filling in its own humble way. As you eat, the air begins to tremble. The church bells have begun to ring. They ring throughout the day, marking the canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, the heartbeat of the city. There are many churches in this place, perhaps 24 or more, each with its own tower and its own distinct voice. There is the deep, booming resonance of the cathedral bell and the frantic, silvery chime of the small parish chapels. They all ring together, a cascading echo of bronze voices spreading across the sagging rooftops, vibrating in the very timber of your walls. The sound is beautiful in its way, a layer of celestial music over the muddy streets. In a world without clocks, the bells are your only guide. They tell you when the world begins and when it must rest. The church is everything. It is not merely a building of stone and glass or a distant institution. It is the very framework of your existence. It is the air you breathe and the ground you walk upon. Every significant moment of your life is tethered to its bells. Your baptism just days after your birth, your marriage in the church porch, the christening of your children, and the inevitable, quiet burial of your loved ones in the hallowed earth. The church's calendar is the map of your year. It dictates when you must toil in the fields or the docks, when you must lay down your tools to rest, when you must fast until your body feels light, and when, on the great feast days, you are allowed to forget your troubles for a few hours of communal joy. It is a world of order, a world of certainty, in a life that is otherwise so fragile. And there are many, many feast days. Despite the crushing weight of your labor, the calendar is dotted with moments of reprieve. There are saints' days, holy days, and quiet commemorations for the life of Christ or the Virgin Mary. The church is, paradoxically, the only source of true leisure in your hard life. On these holy days, the gears of the city grind to a halt. You don't work. You don't haul stone. You don't scrub linens. First, you attend Mass, standing on the cold stone floor of the parish church, bathed in the scent of incense and the low, rhythmic chanting of Latin, a language you don't understand, but whose sounds are as familiar as the rain. But then, you have time. The rest of the day belongs to you. It is time to sit in the dim, golden light of the alehouse, feeling the warmth of the brew in your chest. It is time to watch a troupe of players in the market square or to gamble, illegally, tucked away in a quiet alley, but everyone does it anyway, the dice clicking softly on a wooden barrel. It is time, simply, to rest, to let your muscles soften and your mind go quiet. You believe in God, of course. Everyone does. In 1348, atheism isn't a concept. It's a theoretical impossibility. Not believing in God would be like not believing in the ground beneath your feet or the sun in the sky. The divine is woven into the very fabric of the air. The question isn't whether God exists, but rather, what does he want from you? And why, you wonder as you look at your calloused hands, is he so consistently angry all the time? Because make no mistake, the God of your world is a God of thunder and judgment. He is a wrathful God, a cosmic architect who has built a world of strict hierarchies. He is watching, always, from the high, vaulted ceilings of the cathedrals and the vast, empty spaces of the clouds. And according to the world you live in, he is disappointed. The priests make this very clear in their Sunday sermons, their voices echoing off the lime-washed walls. Your suffering is not an accident. It is deserved. Your poverty is likely a consequence of sin, a spiritual stain you cannot wash away. Perhaps it is your own secret failings. Perhaps it is the sins of your parents. Or perhaps it is simply the ancient weight of Adam and Eve's fall from grace. It's all rather unclear, but the conclusion is always the same. You have it coming. Life is a penance, a long, slow walk through a valley of shadows, where every ache in your back and every cold night in your bed is a small payment toward a debt you can never fully settle. But God is also merciful, or so the priests say, their voices dropping to a hushed, reverent tone. They offer a sliver of hope, a narrow gate through which you might pass if you are diligent. If you pray until your knees are numb on the cold stone, if you confess every stray thought and dark impulse, if you attend Mass and make offerings you can't afford, sacrificing a crust of bread or a copper coin, then perhaps there is a chance. Not in this life, obviously. That is a dream you stopped dreaming long ago. This life is a crucible of suffering, a weary pilgrimage through the mud and the cold. That is simply the nature of the world. But the next life is where the scales are balanced. It could be paradise, a place of perpetual spring and golden light, where the pottage is never thin and the body never aches. Or it could be hell. And by all accounts, hell makes your current existence look like a holiday. You are more afraid of hell than you are of almost anything in the physical world. More than the winter chill, more than the tax collector, more than the hunger that gnaws at your belly. The priests describe it in vivid, creative detail, their words painting pictures in the dim light of the nave. There is fire, of course, a roaring, unquenchable heat, but there is also ice, a freezing, lonely void where the soul is brittle and shattered. This is not a distant, abstract fear. It is not a metaphor. This is as real to you as the dirt beneath your fingernails or the weight of your own limbs. You see hell every time you enter the church, depicted in the doom paintings on the lime-washed walls, vivid reds and yellows showing the damned being led away in chains. You see it in the stone sculptures above the doorways, where leering gargoyles and twisted faces warn of the price of a straying soul. You hear about it every Sunday, described with a strange dark relish by priests who seem to dwell on the details perhaps a bit too much. It sits in the back of your mind like a shadow, making the quiet moments of the night feel heavier, longer, and deeper. So you pray. You pray often, your lips moving in a silent, rhythmic murmur as you go about your chores. You cross yourself constantly, an automatic fluid gesture of thumb to chest, heart to shoulder, a reflex as natural as breathing. You wear a small pewter cross around your neck, suspended by a simple cord. It cost you 2 days of your husband's wages, a staggering sum for a bit of dull metal, but you consider it a shield. It is more necessary than bread. You make sure your children learn their prayers, their high, soft voices repeating the Latin syllables until they are etched into their minds. You confess your sins, though the line between a mistake and a mortal transgression is often blurry. You confess the anger you felt when the pottage burned. You confess the envy you felt for the merchant's wife. You confess everything, casting your burdens onto the church just to be safe. Take another breath. Let your body relax further into the mattress. We are building this world slowly, carefully, one detail at a time. The sun is rising now, a pale, milky light filtering through the cracks in the shutters. It paints thin, dusty stripes across the dirt floor. It's time to rise. Your body aches as you shift your weight, a deep, resonant protest from your joints. You are only 32 years old, but in the 14th century, you are a woman in her autumn. You feel ancient. Years of relentless labor, the thin nutrition of the pottage, and the toll of 5 childbirths have etched a story into your frame. Your hands are rough, the skin thickened and mapped with small scars. Your back is a constant dull hum of discomfort. Your teeth are increasingly unreliable, a few already lost to the years. You move to the corner where a wooden bucket sits. You splash water on your face. It is bracingly cold, skin shivering cold, and though it is slightly clouded, it serves its purpose. It snaps you into the present. You dress in layers, a slow process of shielding yourself against the damp. First, the linen shift, soft from 100 washings. Then, the wool kirtle, a heavy, dark garment that smells of the hearth. Finally, the apron, thick and sturdy. Everything you wear is a mosaic of patches, repairs upon repairs, stitches laid over stitches. New clothing is an extraordinary luxury, a dream for another life. Most of what you own has a history. It was bought secondhand from a peddler, or inherited from a sister, or painstakingly made at home from the coarsest, cheapest wool. You pull your hair back and cover it with a simple linen coif, tucking away the strands that have already begun to turn gray. You are ready. The day has begun. Your husband dresses in the shadows, his movements practiced and economical. He pulls on his tunic and his thick wool hose, then steps into his leather shoes. These shoes are a testament to his life. They have been patched, stitched, and resoled so many times that they are now more repair than original leather. They are a map of every mile he has walked, every heavy load he has carried. Finally, he wraps a simple cloth around his waist as a belt and picks up his small iron knife. It is his most valuable possession, a tool for work, for eating, for protection. He slides it into his belt and nods to you, a silent acknowledgement before he steps out to face the uncertainty of the day's labor. The children stumble awake next, moving like small, groggy shadows in the dim light. They don't complain. They are born to this rhythm. They are hungry, but it is a quiet, patient hunger. You give them each a piece of dark rye bread. It is yesterday's bake, or perhaps the day before's, and it is as hard as a whetstone. You tell them to keep it in their mouths, to let their saliva soften it slowly, making it last as long as possible. They sit on the edge of the straw mattress, their small jaws working rhythmically, eyes staring at nothing in particular as the world slowly comes into focus. This is life. This is your normal. It is not particularly happy, nor is it particularly sad. It simply is. In 1348, you don't have the luxury of wondering if you are fulfilled. You don't contemplate whether you are living your best life or following a hidden passion. Those concepts are ghosts from a future that hasn't been born yet. Your mind is occupied by the heavy, tangible present. You think about the strength in your arms, the amount of grain in the jar, and the height of the sun. You think about surviving the next 12 hours, and then the 12 after that. You think about the coming winter, wondering if the walls will hold, and if the woodpile will last. You live in a state of constant quiet endurance, a steady pulse of survival that has sustained your kind for 1,000 years. And then, one day, the pulse skips. One day, a rumor arrives at the docks. One day, a bell tolls differently. And suddenly, everything changes. The arrival, whispers of something terrible. It begins with rumors. In a world without paper or post, news is a living thing. It breathes through the whispers at the market stalls. It travels in the heavy packs of merchants, and it spills out over the sticky tables of the tavern after a second mug of ale. The rumors are strange at first, disturbing. They are the kind of stories that make you cross yourself instinctively, your thumb tracing that familiar path over your heart as you mutter a quick prayer for protection. But they are also the kind of stories you tell yourself are exaggerated. You've lived long enough to know that a story grows taller with every mile it travels. You tell yourself it's just another traveler's tale, a ghost story meant to make the listener buy the next round of drinks. They say people in the Far East are dying of a terrible sickness. The Orient, the Silk Road, places so distant and shimmering they might as well be imaginary. Lands of silk and spice that exist only in the background of your mind. Entire cities have been wiped out, or so the voices say. They speak of caravans that arrive at their destinations to find every trader slumped over their camels, dead in the saddle. They tell of ghost ships, great, silent vessels that drift into harbor with no living crew, their sails tattered like funeral shrouds, carrying nothing but a cargo of the departed. It sounds like something from a Sunday sermon, like one of those apocalyptic warnings about God's final judgment. You file it away in the back of your mind with all the other frightening things you've heard. Rumors of dragons in the frozen north, of sea monsters with eyes like dinner plates in the Atlantic, of the Antichrist preparing to make his appearance in a distant land. You hear the vicious, persistent whispers that the Jews are poisoning the wells, a lie born of fear and old shadows. But the rumors don't fade. They persist. They grow more specific, more grounded, and much closer. The sickness reached Constantinople, then the Italian ports, Caffa, Venice, Genoa. Then, the descriptions start to lose their mythical quality and become terrifyingly physical. The whispers describe buboes, hard, painful swellings the size of an apple or an egg, appearing in the groin, the armpits, and the neck. They speak of a fever that burns like a furnace from within. They speak of the great mortality, where people begin to vomit black blood. And the speed of it, that is what haunts you. 3 days, maybe 4, from the first shiver of a symptom to the cold silence of death. Most people die, the rumors say. Not some, not many. No, the rumors say that almost everyone who catches it is gone before the week is out. The shadow is no longer on the horizon. It is at the gates. The heavy weight of rumor. You hear this at the market while buying onions. Small, earthy globes that are one of the few things you can afford this week. The vendor, a woman whose face is a map of deep lines and who usually knows every soul's business, speaks in a low conspiratorial whisper. She leans close, and you can smell the sharp scent of garlic and old wool on her breath. They say it's God's judgment, she murmurs, her eyes darting to the sky as if expecting a bolt of lightning. For our sins, the pride of the rich, the greed of the merchants. The end times are coming. The scrolls are being unrolled. You nod, the wooden onions feeling heavy in your hand. You cross yourself, That familiar, comforting motion, buy your produce and move on. But the story doesn't stay at the stall. It sits in your stomach, a cold, heavy stone that doesn't dissolve. More rumors drift through the narrow streets like smoke. The sickness is in London now, they say. No, wait, that was a false alarm, just a summer fever. Or was it? It's impossible to be sure. In your world, news is a ghost. By the time a story reaches your ears, it has been filtered through dozens of retellings, becoming distorted and strange, like a reflection in rippling water. The why of it is even more confusing than the where. Some people say the catastrophe is carried by bad air, corrupted, invisible vapors rising from deep fissures in the earth, or volcanic eruptions in lands so far away they have no names. Miasma, the physicians call it. They speak of poisoned air that clings to the low ground and hides in the mist. You hear people say you shouldn't breathe deeply when the wind turns and blows from the south, as if the air itself has become a carrier of death. Others look even higher, to the stars. They say it's the alignment of the planets, a celestial collision of spirits. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars came together in an unusual brooding configuration a few years back. And this, they claim, corrupted the very atmosphere of the Earth. An astrologer passed through the city recently, a man in a dark robe who gave a lecture in the square about the conjunction of the spheres. You didn't attend. It cost a copper coin you didn't have, but you heard the summary from a neighbor. You look up at the night sky now and wonder if those cold, distant points of light are truly conspiring against you. The stars, once your guides, now feel like silent, watching enemies. The Jews, predictably, are blamed. In a world that feels as if it is slipping off its axis, people reach for the oldest, cruelest explanations they know. The whispers are a poison of their own. They say the Jews have poisoned the wells with strange powders, or that their very presence has curdled the favor of God, or that they are in league with the great enemy himself. The specifics of the lies vary from street to street, but the conclusion is always the same. It is a deeply unfair, tragic madness. But in 1348, it is so common that it barely registers as news. Anti-Jewish violence is just another jagged feature of medieval life, a dark fire that erupts periodically, as predictable and ugly as a recurring fever. When it isn't the Jews, the fear finds other targets. Some say the lepers are spreading the rot out of spite. Others point to foreigners or any stranger whose accent doesn't match the local tongue. Fear is a sharp lens that makes everyone look like an outsider. You find yourself walking the streets with a new wariness, your eyes darting to those you once greeted with a nod. Everyone is a potential carrier of the shadow. The church, as always, provides the map through the darkness. The guidance is stern and repetitive. Fast until your body feels hollow. Pray until your voice is a rasp. Confess every dark thought that has ever crossed your mind. Attend extra masses, standing for hours in the cold, incense-heavy air. And give money, especially that. Even though your purse is empty and your children are hungry, the priests remind you that your immortal soul is at stake. What is a little earthly hunger? A few more days of a growling stomach compared to the infinite, howling darkness of eternal damnation. To appease the divine, great processions are organized. You join them, your feet shuffling in a slow, rhythmic beat against the dirt. Hundreds, then thousands, walk through the winding city streets in a long, serpent-like line. You carry holy relics, a splinter of a saint's bone, a scrap of ancient cloth, hoping their proximity will shield you. You sing hymns in a low, droning chant that vibrates in your chest, praying loudly so that God cannot fail to hear. You watch the flickering candles, their flames dancing in the drafty alleys, and you hope. You hope that if enough voices rise in unison, if enough knees are bruised by the stone, perhaps God will be appeased. Perhaps he will finally turn his wrath aside and let the sun shine on a healthy world once more. You join these processions because there is no other path to take. Everyone does. There is a strange, heavy comfort in the solidarity of shared fear. A sense that you are no longer a solitary soul shivering in a dark room, but part of a great breathing machine of faith. For a few hours, the crushing helplessness of your life is replaced by movement. You are doing something. You are walking, you are singing, you are pleading. You are not just waiting for the shadow to cross your threshold. The hymns begin to rise, echoing off the leaning timber walls of the narrowest alleys. The sound is not sharp. It is a low, rolling wave of sound. Hundreds of voices, some cracked with age, some high and thin from childhood, all rising together in a singular, desperate harmony. They plead for mercy in a language of old stone and incense. Let yourself feel that rhythm now. Imagine the steady, heavy thud-thud of 1,000 feet striking the earth in unison. It is a slow, deliberate pace, the pace of a world that moves no faster than a heartbeat. The sound of the shuffling feet is like the rushing of a distant river, a constant shushing noise that fills the spaces between the words of the hymns. You can smell the hot, dripping wax from the hundreds of tallow candles, a thick, fatty scent that hangs in the still air of the street. You see the flickering light dancing on the backs of the people in front of you, turning their rough wool cloaks into landscapes of shifting gold and shadow. There is a collective hope in this movement, a fragile, flickering belief that if you just walk far enough, if you sing loudly enough, if you show enough contrition, the heavens will finally crack open and pour down grace instead of judgment. But beneath the rhythm, beneath the song, there is the fear. It is a silent, cold current, running under the warmth of the crowd. It is a fear you barely acknowledge, tucked away in the darkest corner of your mind. The fear that the heavens are silent. The fear that the bells and the bones and the songs are not enough. But for now, you ignore it. You just keep walking. You let the rhythm carry you through the darkening streets. The first cases, and then it arrives. It doesn't come with the sounding of trumpets or the clatter of a distant army. It arrives as a thief in the night, quiet, patient, and invisible. One day the world is as it has always been, and the next, the air itself feels different. Heavy, charged with a secret you haven't yet learned to name. The first person you know who dies is your neighbor's son. He was a young man, barely 20, with the broad shoulders and thick hands of an apprentice to a cooper. You've watched him for years, rolling heavy wooden barrels down the street with a cheerful whistle. He was strong, the very picture of health. He complained of feeling a bit unwell one morning. A simple headache, he thought, or perhaps he'd spent too much time in the sun. But by evening, the shivers had taken him. He lay on his straw mattress, his teeth chattering so loudly you could hear them through the lath and plaster wall. The next day, the swellings appeared. They call them buboes, and they are a cruel, mocking sight. You see one on his neck as his mother pulls back his tunics. A hard, angry lump the size of a pigeon's egg, then a plum, then an apple. They turn a dark, bruised purple, pulsing with a heat you can feel from a foot away. They are so painful that even the weight of a linen sheet makes him weep. He was dead 3 days later. The silence from the house next door is more deafening than the screaming ever was. The family is devastated, of course, their grief a raw, howling thing. But more than that, they are terrified. And you are terrified with them. Because now, it is real. It is no longer a rumor from a distant port or a story from a traveler's tongue. It's here. It's in your street, in your neighborhood, close enough to feel its cold breath on your neck. More cases follow with a sickening, rhythmic speed. A merchant 2 streets over, a man who once seemed untouchable in his fine robes. A beggar who has slept in the shadow of the church porch for years, now slumped over and unmoving. A woman who sells bread in the market. You bought a loaf from her just last week, felt her hand brush yours as you exchanged coins, and now she is gone. The city is no longer a collection of homes. It is becoming a map of empty chairs. The pattern of the great mortality becomes clear. and it is more horrifying than any story told in the tavern. It is a predictable, brutal machinery. First, the shivering fever, then the swellings, then the end. Some people develop dark blotches on their skin, lenticulae. The physicians call them purple-black spots that look like bruises but do not fade. They spread like ink on parchment. Others find the sickness has taken residence in their chest. They cough up bright, frothy blood that stains the rushes on the floor. Most cruel of all are the false dawns. You see a neighbor seem to improve for a day. The fever breaks, their eyes clear, and their family weeps with a frantic, desperate hope. But it is a trick of the light. By evening, they crash suddenly, their life flickering out in a matter of hours, as if a candle has been snuffed by a sudden draft. Almost no one recovers. That is the heavy, cold truth that settles over the city like a winter fog. You hear whispered tales of a survivor, a tanner's daughter who broke the fever, or a monk who walked out of the infirmary. But these stories are so rare they feel more troubling than the deaths. Why did they live while the pious and the young perished? Are they blessed by a miracle, or are they somehow unnatural, spared by a power you don't wish to name? The physicians, with their long robes and their academic talk, are utterly useless. They are like men trying to hold back the tide with a sieve. They don't know what causes the rot, how it leaps from house to house, or how to soothe the burning skin. They prescribe the same old remedies they use for every ailment. They drain the blood until the patient is pale as a ghost. They offer bitter purges that only weaken the body. They burn exotic herbs that fill the room with a cloying, suffocating smoke. And they charge enormous fees for the privilege of watching you die. You realize now that gold is no shield. The wealthy, with their silk pillows and their learned doctors, are falling just as readily as the beggars in the street. And then the desertion begins. You wake one morning to the sound of heavy carriage wheels and the frantic clopping of horses. Some physicians have fled in the night, abandoning their patients to the mercy of God. The wealthy are packing their chests, locking their great oak doors, and retreating to country estates deep in the green hills, where they believe the air is too pure for the plague to follow. You watch them go from your narrow window, a long line of those who can afford to run, leaving the rest of you behind in the stagnant, heavy air of the city, abandoned, bitter, and waiting. Plague doctors begin to haunt the streets. Strange, silent figures that look more like birds of prey than men of science. They wear long coats of heavy waxed leather that gleam in the dim light, and gloves that hide every inch of skin. Their most striking feature is the mask, a wooden or leather beak, long and curved, stuffed with dried roses, lavender, and pungent spices meant to filter the corrupted air. Through the circular glass eye holes, their gaze is distant and unblinking. They look like something plucked from a nightmare. But in this dying city, they are the only ones left to offer a hand. Not that their hands bring much comfort. They carry long wooden poles to examine patients from a distance, and when they do act, it is often with a heavy blade to lance the buboes. It is an agonizing procedure that fills the room with a sharp, copper scent, and usually only hastens the inevitable. They prescribe potions of crushed emeralds or arsenic that do nothing but drain a family's final coins. In the end, they are less like healers and more like bookkeepers of the grave, moving from door to door to record the mounting numbers of the fallen. You try to build a fortress of scent to protect your family. You avoid the street as if the cobblestones themselves were hot coals. Inside your room, you keep a small fire going even in the heat, burning stalks of rosemary or dried pine, anything aromatic that might scrub the air of its poison. When you must venture out for water or grain, you carry a pomander, a small, perforated metal ball filled with cloves and cinnamon, pressed firmly against your nose. You breathe through the spices until your head swims, desperate to drown out the heavy, sweet-sour smell of the city. You pray until your voice is a mere shadow. The churches are never empty. They stay open through the night, the candle flames guttering in the drafts. You see people who once held their heads high, now kneeling on the freezing stone, weeping openly, as they bargain with the Almighty. They promise to give everything they own to the poor, to never speak a cross word again, to live as saints, if only the shadow passes over their door. But for others, the fear turns into a wild, frantic energy. If the world is ending, they reason, why meet it with a dry throat? The alehouses are just as full as the churches. In the dim, lantern-lit corners, you hear the frantic laughter of those seeking oblivion in the bottom of a mug. Social rules, the invisible threads that hold a city together, are fraying. You see people gambling in the open, fighting over trifles, and seeking quick, desperate liaisons in the shadows. When the sun might not rise for you tomorrow, the laws of man and God start to feel very far away. The breaking of the world. The authorities try to maintain a semblance of order, but their decrees feel like whispers against a gale. The great iron-studded city gates are slammed shut and barred against outsiders, but the ghost is already inside the walls. The precaution comes too late to matter. Quarantine rules are established with a desperate, frantic energy. When the sickness is discovered in a house, a red cross is painted on the door, a silent, bleeding mark against the wood. Sometimes, the doors are even sealed from the outside, the inhabitants left to face their fate within. It is a brutal logic, a cold math of survival. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Except the math doesn't hold. The plague keeps spreading, leaping across walls and over locked doors like a flickering flame. It doesn't respect the quarantine. It doesn't care for your aromatic herbs, your whispered prayers, or your desperate sacrifices. It is a tide that refuses to recede. And then, the bodies begin to accumulate. This is the horror no one truly anticipated, the sheer, staggering volume of the departed. In normal times, death is followed by a beautiful, slow ritual. The body is washed with care, wrapped in a clean linen shroud, and carried to the church while the bells toll a steady, mournful rhythm. There are blessings, incense, and the comfort of consecrated ground. Your place in the architecture of heaven depends, in your mind, on these final rites. But now the ritual is broken. People are dying faster than the living can mourn them. The graveyards are full, not metaphorically, but literally. The earth of the churchyards has been turned over so many times it can no longer settle. It is a landscape of fresh mounds and hollows. The grave diggers, those few who haven't yet succumbed to the fever themselves, are exhausted, their shovels moving in a slow, mechanical trance. The air begins to carry a new sound, the rhythmic, heavy clatter of the dead carts. You hear them in the deep of the night, the creak of ungreased wooden wheels, and the tired clopping of a horse's hooves. A voice cries out into the dark, "Bring out your dead," a low, repetitive chant that replaces the church bells. The dignity of the individual is gone. There are no more private graves, no more linen shrouds, just the heavy, collective silence of the pits. Mass graves are dug beyond the city walls, great, yawning gashes in the earth that look like the mouth of the world itself. At first, the bodies are brought by cart and wrapped carefully in whatever cloth could be spared, a final act of human tenderness. But as the days bleed into weeks, even that small dignity fades. The departed are piled one upon another in a silent, heavy geometry of loss. There is no time for the individual. There is only the collective weight of the city. Sometimes, a lone priest stands at the edge of the pit, his voice thin against the wind as he offers a collective blessing for the hundreds lying in the dark below. Sometimes, there is no one at all. The logistics of death have finally completely overwhelmed the rituals of existence. This is a spiritual devastation that cuts deeper than the hunger or the cold. To your mind, to die without a proper burial, without the specific prayers that are meant to light your soul's path through the valley of the shadow, is a horror that rivals the sickness itself. You fear for the souls of your neighbors, drifting in a gray limbo because the living were too tired or too few to sing them home. But in the face of this tide, there is no choice. The living must focus their dwindling strength on the simple act of drawing the next breath. Survival has become a full-time occupation, and even that seems an increasingly fragile hope. Take a breath now. A long, slow, steady breath. Let the image of the city gates and the heavy carts begin to fade into a soft, gray mist. Feel the weight of the 14th century lifting off your chest, like a heavy wool cloak being pulled away. You are safe. You are in your bed, your comfortable, modern bed that is a sanctuary of peace. The air around you is clean, cool, and quiet. You are impossibly far from that world of flickering candles and fearful whispers. You are here, in the present, where the only rhythm that matters is the slow, calm rise and fall of your own chest. The strange tide of survival. The plague does not end with a sudden clearing of the sky. It moves like a terrible, rhythmic tide, surging forward to claim a street, then receding just enough to give you a moment of breathless hope, only to return with a new, colder strength. Weeks turn into long, heavy months. The months stretch into a year, and then another. You learn to live in the permanent shadow of the great mortality, a darkness that becomes as familiar to you as the scent of the hearth. But life, stubborn and persistent, must continue. Even in the midst of a world that feels as if it is unraveling, the stomach still growls, and the children still look to you with wide, expectant eyes. You still need food, and you still need the coin to buy it. Work continues, though the city you walk through is a ghost of its former self. Many of the docks are silent. Many of the kilns have gone cold. So many laborers have been taken by the fever that the world has entered a strange, inverted reality. For the first time in the history of your people, there is more work than there are hands to do it. The masters and the merchants, men who once wouldn't have looked you in the eye, are now desperate. They search the squares with hollow eyes, looking for anyone with the strength to lift a crate or pull a loom. For the first time in your life, you feel a flicker of power, a leverage you never asked for, born from the silence of the graveyards. You hear of men at the docks demanding double their old wages and getting it. You hear of women spinning wool who refuse to work for a pittance. You can feel the shift in the air. The old hierarchies are trembling. The authorities, the men who sit in high stone halls far from the mud, hate this change. They see the rising wages not as survival, but as an affront to the divine order of the world. Laws are passed with a frantic, ink-stained urgency. The statute of laborers, mandating that wages must be frozen at the levels they were before the world broke. They decree that workers must not take advantage of the crisis. To ask for more than your father earned is suddenly considered a sin, a greedy exploitation of a tragedy. But the law is one thing, and the empty stalls at the market are another. You realize, as you walk through the thinning crowds, that the world can never go back to exactly what it was before. The foundation has shifted, and you are standing on the edge of something new. The new laws, written in cold ink by men in distant manors, are widely ignored. They are like dry leaves scattered by a gale. If a merchant has a shipment of spices or cloth rotting on the docks and you are one of the few haulers left with the strength to move it, you can name your price. What is he going to do? Report you to a magistrate who hasn't been seen in months. In this new, fractured world, the law is a ghost. By the time any official finds the breath to punish you, the sickness may have claimed the judge, the merchant, or you. So you keep working. You move through the day with a grim, steady persistence. Your husband hauls. When the work appears, his boots echoing on streets that feel wider and emptier than they used to be. You sit by the small light of the window and spin, though the supply of raw lanolin heavy wool is no longer a steady stream. Out in the countryside, the sheep farmers are dying too, and the flocks wander untended across the rolling hills, their bells tinkling in the silence of overgrown pastures. The children stay closer to home now. They run fewer errands, because the city has pulled a shroud over itself. People are reluctant to crack open their doors for anyone, even a child with a message. The world has become a collection of locked rooms. Food becomes a source of both anxiety and strange dark fortune. With fewer farmers to plow the heavy earth and sow the seed, the production of grain falters. You look out toward the horizon and imagine the golden wheat rotting in the stalks because there are no scythes to cut it down. Grain prices rise until a loaf of bread feels like a treasure. Yet, there is a hollow irony to your hunger. When a farmer dies and leaves no heir, a story repeated in every village. His livestock may simply wander off into the woods or be taken by whoever has the courage to catch them. For the first time in your life, the smell of roasting meat occasionally fills your small room. You eat better during the years of the plague than you ever did in the years of plenty. It feels wrong, a feast built on a foundation of graves. But hunger is a practical thing. It does not care about propriety. It only knows the warmth of a full belly and the temporary strength it brings to keep you moving through the shadow. The city is quieter now, a silence so profound it feels heavy against your ears. The frantic noise of the market, the shouting vendors, the bickering crows, the clatter of 1,000 lives has been replaced by a long, exhaling stillness. There are fewer people in the streets, and those who remain move like shadows, ghosting along the edges of the building. Shops that once smelled of expensive spices or fresh sawn wood are closed, their heavy shutters bolted, their owners either dead or fled to the hills. In the main square, where the heart of the city used to beat the loudest, nature has begun its slow, patient return. Pale green grass pushes up between the cobblestones, and wildflowers nod in the drafty alleys. Birds, sensing the lack of human hands, have begun to build nests in the high, abandoned rafters of the great halls. Even the air has shifted. The sharp, metallic tang of the early days has faded. With fewer humans to fill the streets, the old sense of waste and unwashed wool are lighter. But there is a new smell that has taken their place, a scent that is sweet and rotten at the same time. It is the heavy, cloying perfume of decomposition. It seems to drift from everywhere and nowhere, rising from the foundations and settling in the curtains. You cannot escape it. It permeates your hair, your clothes, and the very bread you eat. But, remarkably, you become accustomed to it. You become accustomed to everything. You walk past the piles of furniture and belongings left outside the houses, where entire families have vanished, and you no longer stop to wonder who they were. You hear the rhythmic, mournful creak of the dead carts as they move through the streets at dawn, and it becomes a sound no different from the wind. The church bells toll constantly, marking death after death after death, until the individual chimes blend into a single, low, vibrating note of mourning that hums in the background of your life. You navigate the city like a sailor through treacherous shoals. Everyone knows the black houses, the places where the fever burned the brightest, and you give them a wide, respectful berth. You take long, circuitous routes to reach the baker, walking through winding passages just to avoid a door with a faded red cross. Whether this protects you, no one truly knows. There is no proof, no logic, only the desperate, quiet hope that distance is a shield. Strangers, once a source of news and excitement, are now seen as heralds of doom. When a group of travelers appears at the end of a street, dusty and tired, the neighborhood rises as one to drive them away with stones and shouts. It is a cruel thing, a sharp and jagged reaction, but it is born from an understandable fear. A fear that has become the very marrow of your bones. The scapegoating reaches a fever pitch, a dark fire that consumes everything in its path. In cities across the continent, ancient communities are wiped out in a single night of blind, frantic rage. Mobs, fueled by a terror they cannot name, turn upon their Jewish neighbors with a cruelty that defies reason. The simple, observable truth that the Jews are falling to the fever at the same rate as the baker and the priest holds no weight against the tide of panic. Logic has been discarded, replaced by a desperate, jagged need to find someone, anyone, to blame for the silence of the heavens. It is in this atmosphere of broken faith that the flagellants appear. You hear them before you see them. A low, rhythmic chanting that vibrates in the cobblestones, followed by the wet, rhythmic thud of leather against skin. They move from town to town like a traveling army of ghosts. Hundreds of men, stripped to the waist, their eyes fixed on a horizon only they can see. They carry heavy whips, thick leather thongs, studded with sharp metal points. And as they march, they lash their own backs in a synchronized display of agony. Blood runs in dark, gleaming rivulets down their spines, staining the dirt of the road. They believe the great mortality is a divine lash, a punishment for the collective sins of the world, and they offer their own flesh as a sacrifice to appease a wrathful God. You watch them pass one day, standing pressed against the cold stone of an archway. You are mesmerized and horrified, the rhythmic sound of the whips lulling you into a strange, dark trance. Part of you, the part that is weary and desperate for an answer, wonders if they are right. You think of the doom paintings in the church. You think of the vivid descriptions of hell. Perhaps this is the only language God understands. Spectacular, public suffering. Perhaps if the whole world knelt and bled, the shadow would finally lift. But then, as the line shuffles past, the trance breaks. You see a man in the middle of the procession, his back a map of raw wounds, but his face is flushed with a heat that has nothing to do with the sun. He coughs, a deep rattling sound that breaks the rhythm of the chant. You see another man stumble, his eyes glassy and unfocused, the telltale swellings visible even beneath his film of sweat and blood. The realization hits you like a physical blow. The plague is killing them too. All their piety, all their spectacular suffering, all their public displays of remorse, it is no shield. They are dying just like the merchants, the beggars, and the children. It is a thought that haunts the quiet moments of your night. It suggests a world where the rules have been erased. It suggests that perhaps the heavens are not waiting for an apology. Perhaps God's will is a great, slow-moving wheel that crushes the pious and the sinner alike. And there is nothing anyone, king or flagellant, can do to stay its course. You are left with only the silence and the slow, steady beat of your own heart in the dark. You push the dark thought away, burying it beneath the rhythm of your daily chores. It is too cold, too vast a despair to hold. You must believe that your small actions, the whispered prayers, the bundles of dried sage, the way you scrub the floors, actually mean something. You must believe that there is a thread of logic in the fabric of the world. Otherwise, the simple act of waking up would be impossible. Your children are still healthy. In a neighborhood where the dead cart stops at every other door, this feels nothing short of a miracle. You watch them with a desperate, sharp-eyed intensity. You watch the way they breathe while they sleep. You check the clarity of their eyes. You listen for a cough, as if it were a thunderclap. So far, they are untouched. Why? You don't know. Is it the way you've kept them inside? Is it the rosemary? Or is it simply a stray beam of God's mercy falling on your house while the rest of the street sits in shadow? Your life has become a running conversation with the heavens. It isn't just the formal Latin of the Mass anymore. It's a constant, silent murmur that follows you from the well to the hearth. Please protect them. Please let the sun rise for us one more time. Please, please, please. You speak to the Virgin Mary as if she were a neighbor standing in the room. You petition the saints as if they were old friends who might just have a word with the Creator on your behalf. Everyone's faith grows more intense in these times, but it also becomes more tangled, more complicated. If God is the author of all things, then He is the author of this too. The priests tell you that the world is being purified, that the gold must be tested in the furnace. But when you see a child taken, or when the most pious woman in the parish dies while the local thief survives, the divine plan feels like a map written in a language you can no longer read. Yet, you cling to your belief with white-knuckled strength. You have to. Because the alternative, that the world is just a collection of random, heartless collisions, is a darkness deeper than any plague. You choose to believe there is a meaning, even if it is hidden far beyond the stars. You choose to believe that every prayer is heard, even if the answer is a silence you don't yet understand. Let yourself sink deeper into rest now. Feel the heavy, comforting weight of your body against the mattress, the softness of your pillows, the absolute, unshakable safety of your room. You are a witness to this story, a traveler through time, but you are not bound by its shadows. You are here, in the light of the present. The air you breathe is cool and clean. The world around you is at peace. The landscape of the hushed city. The city is physically transformed, as if a great wind has swept through and carried away the breath of the world. Streets that once hummed with the constant overlapping noise of thousands are now so quiet you can hear the rustle of a single dry leaf skittering across the cobbles. Buildings that once overflowed with the warmth and chaos of families now stand vacant, their doors hanging open like slack jaws. Inside, the artifacts of life, a carved wooden spoon, a child's rag doll, a loom half-threaded, are left exactly where they fell, slowly gathering dust or being picked over by those desperate enough to risk the shadows. Trade, the very lifeblood of the city, has collapsed into a stagnant pool. The horizon, once crowded with the masts of ships from every corner of the known world, is now a cold, empty line. Occasionally, a vessel drifts into the harbor, silent and ghost-like, with no one to haul the lines or drop the anchor. A ship of the dead, carrying nothing but silence and rot. Merchants have vanished from the roads. The ancient paths are now dangerous, haunted by desperate bandits who have nothing left to lose, and by the invisible specter of the plague itself. Every village you pass is a potential tomb, every town a new gateway to the grave. The market, once a kaleidoscope of color and sound, is now a mere shadow of its former self. You walk through the square and see only a handful of stalls, scattered like lonely islands in a sea of gray stone. The vibrant luxuries of your youth have disappeared entirely. There are no more pungent spices from the east to sting the nose, no fine soft cloth from Flanders to brush against your skin, no ruby red wine from France to warm the blood. There is only the essential, grain, onions, a bit of salt, and even these are guarded, as if they were gold. Money itself has become strange, losing its weight and its meaning. In some ways there is less of it. Dead men do not trade, and the great gears of commerce have ground to a halt. Yet for some, there is a sudden, unsettling abundance. Coins inherited from an entire family line, extinguished in a week, or gold found in the corners of a house where no one is left to claim it. But the metal feels cold in your hand. People look at a silver groat with suspicion, wondering if the plague can cling to the surface of a coin as easily as it clings to a sleeve. You see people washing their money in vinegar or refusing to touch coins that come from the black streets. Wealth, once the ultimate goal, has become just another potential carrier of the end. Barter returns to the city like an old, forgotten language. With the value of silver in doubt and the flow of trade frozen, you trade the strength of your hands and the rhythmic hum of your spinning wheel for the things you need to survive. You trade a day's labor for a basket of firewood. You trade your spinning for a loaf of bread. The economy has reverted to something more primitive, more direct, and strangely more honest. You are no longer dealing in abstract numbers, but in the tangible weight of survival. Property values have collapsed, as if the very stones of the city have lost their worth. Who would think of buying a house when half the city stands silent, and empty buildings are as common as weeds? Theoretically, you could gather your belongings and move your family into a better dwelling, a grander house with stone walls and a slate roof. Some people do, taking over abandoned manors with a frantic, desperate greed. But to you, it feels wrong. It feels like grave robbing. Those houses still hold the echoes of the families that inhabited them. They are dead now, but their presence lingers in the dust motes and the shadows of the doorways. Moving would also mean sifting through someone else's life, touching the wool they wore, breathing the air of the rooms where they drew their final breaths. You wonder if the plague lingers in the fibers of a tapestry or the grain of a wooden table. No one can say for sure. And so, you stay where you are, in your small, familiar room, preferring the safety of your own shadows to the luxury of a stranger's ghost. The wealthy neighborhoods, once the vibrant, glittering jewels of the city, are now the quietest places of all. The rich mostly fled or perished in their high, locked chambers. Their fine houses stand like hollowed-out shells, slowly deteriorating in the damp air. You hear stories of beggars and the truly desperate breaking into these palaces, searching for hidden grain or silver plate. Normally, the authorities would meet such thievery with the gallows, but the authorities are stretched thin, their numbers decimated by the fever. Crime goes unpunished more often than not, but even the thieves move quietly, as if afraid to wake the city. The churches remain the heart of your world, but even they are weary. Many priests, the men who once seemed untouchable, have died. They could not avoid the sick and the dying if they were to do their holy work. The remaining clergy are like men in a dream, overwhelmed, performing multiple masses a day in a mechanical trance, hearing confessions until their ears are numb, and presiding over mass burials where the names are no longer being read. The bells still ring, but their voices have changed. In the world before, each soul was honored with its own tolling, a slow, rhythmic announcement to the heavens that a neighbor had passed. But now, the deaths are a flood, and the bells cannot keep pace. If they tolled for everyone, the iron would never be silent. The air would be a constant, vibrating scream of grief. And so, the practice changes. The bells mark the hours. They call to the faithful for prayer, but the individual deaths go unannounced, slipping away in a heavy, unremarked silence. It is another small way the architecture of your world has collapsed, leaving the sky feeling strangely empty. You find yourself crossing the threshold of the church less often. It feels dangerous now. The heavy, sweet smell of incense, mixed with the warm, stagnant breath of 100 people in an enclosed space. You look at the stone arches and see not a sanctuary, but a trap. Many feel as you do, retreating into the private cathedrals of their own homes. Yet, others are driven by a different fear, a terror that to stop praying, to stop kneeling on the consecrated stone, is to invite the shadow to strike. The churches remain a sea of the faithful and the desperate, their low murmurs echoing in the dim light, like the sound of a distant tide. The city walls, which once stood as the sturdy guardians of your safety, have begun to feel like the bars of a cage. You are tethered to this place. The rumors from the countryside are no better. They speak of entire villages where the hearths have gone cold and the wheat rots in the fields because there is no one left to harvest it. And besides, where would you go? This city, even in its current wounded state, is the only map you know. You know which stones are slick with moss, which wells run deep and clean, and which narrow passages lead to the heart of the shadow. Home is a heavy word, but it is yours. Street life has faded into a ghostly stillness. The alleys, once a cacophony of children's laughter and the sharp cries of games, are now silent and dusty. The children no longer play. They sit in doorways with old, watchful eyes or stay tucked away in the safety of the dark. Even the animals have vanished. The dogs and pigs that used to serve as the city's cleanup crew, wandering the gutters with a busy, grunting energy, are gone. Some were taken by the hunger of the starving. Others simply succumbed to the same silence as their masters. The city is becoming a place of long shadows and soft, creeping grass, waiting for a future that feels impossibly far away. The rats have become the new masters of the city. They've always been there, of course a shadow presence in the sewers and the grain stores. But now they are bold, as if they know the balance of power has shifted. They scurry across the cobblestones in the pale light of day, their dark, bead-like eyes watching from the thresholds of abandoned homes. They nest in the fine tapestries of the empty manors and swarm over the piles of refuse that no one has the strength to clear. You look at them with a tired hatred, but they are part of the landscape now, as permanent and indifferent as the cold stones themselves. You do not know. No one in your world can even imagine the secret the rats carry. You do not know that the tiny fleas living in their fur, are the true architects of this great mortality. You do not know that as an infected Ratha's heart stops, its tiny passengers seek the warmth of a human host, leaping across the gap to bite and spill their poison into the blood. If you knew this, you would wage a war of fire against every scuttling shadow. But you don't know. To you, they are just another plague of the earth, thriving in the ruins of the city. When the sun dips below the horizon, the city transforms into a place of profound, absolute darkness. In the years before, there were always flickering lights in windows, the warm glow of torches, the distant sound of a tavern song. But now, the night is a heavy, velvet curtain. There are fewer candles to light, fewer people with the heart to stay up late. The city sleeps earlier and wakes later, as if the very stones are trying to conserve their energy for the long, slow ordeal of survival. You lie awake sometimes in the silence of your own room, listening to the sounds of the hushed city. You hear the frantic, rhythmic scurry of the rats beneath the floorboards. You hear the distant, thin sound of crying, a low, rhythmic grieving that seems to have no beginning and no end. The wind moves through the empty buildings, catching on the jagged glass of broken windows and the open doors, creating eerie, hollow whistles that sound like the voices of the departed. The city feels haunted, as if the air itself is thick with the memories of those who were here only a month ago. But as you listen, let the sounds become a soft, white noise. The scurry, the wind, the distant hum, they are all far away. Feel the profound peace of this moment, the absolute safety of your surroundings. The year 1348 is a story in a book, a shadow in a dream. You are here, in the present. You are warm. You are safe. The past is a distant shore, and you are drifting away from it on a calm, dark sea of rest. The silent heaviness of the soul. The plague raises questions that no one can answer in a way that truly settles the heart. They are the kinds of questions that visit you in the middle of the night, when the fire has burned glowing embers, and the silence of the city feels like a weight on your chest. You find yourself wondering about God, about justice, and about the fundamental shape of the world you thought you knew. You have lived your whole life believing that the world is a mirror of heaven, that God is a righteous judge who rewards virtue and punishes the wicked. This was the bedrock of your reality, taught by the priests and echoed in every story you ever heard. But the plague does not follow these rules. It is a storm that strikes without reason, an ocean that drowns the saint and the sinner alike. You think of the woman from the next street over, a soul of pure kindness who spent her days in prayer and her nights tending to the poor. She died in 3 days, her hands still clutching her rosary. You think of the young priest who refused to flee, whose voice was a balm to the dying until it was silenced by the same fever. And the children, little ones who haven't lived long enough to know the meaning of malice, gone before they could even bloom. Meanwhile, the man who cheats his neighbors and the drunkard who starts fires in the alleyways are still here, their voices loud and healthy in the quiet street. It makes you wonder, what is the pattern? Where is the logic in a judgment that seems so indiscriminate? If this is a divine winnowing, why does it seem to take the grain and leave the chaff? The official explanation from the high pulpits is that God's ways are a vast, mysterious ocean far beyond the reach of human understanding. They tell you that you must have faith, a blind, absolute trust, that there is a divine plan hidden behind the suffering, like the sun hidden behind a thick bank of storm clouds. They say the plague is a test, a fire meant to purify the soul and prepare it for a glory that cannot be understood in this world. You try to believe this. You hold on to it like a lifeline. Because if there is no plan, if there is no higher meaning to the empty chairs and the silent streets, then the world is a cold and terrifying place. You choose to believe that the silence of God is not absence, but a mystery too large for your tired mind to hold. Let your own mind find its silence now. The questions are heavy, but you don't have to carry them anymore. Feel the safety of your own space, the way the darkness of your room is not a void, but a soft, protective blanket. You are not required to understand the patterns of history. You are only required to rest. The ritual of the road. The doubt remains, a cold stone in your stomach, but you have learned to live with it as you live with the hunger. To doubt is to invite the abyss. It is a path that leads to a darkness even the church cannot light. So, like everyone around you, you bury the why beneath the how. You become more devout. Your life, a sequence of frantic, repetitive acts of faith. You find yourself at the shrine of a local saint, your knees bruised by the cold stone, confessing the smallest transgressions, a moment of anger, a selfish thought, a loaf of bread hidden away. If the heavens are silent, perhaps you are simply not speaking loudly enough. It is out of this desperate silence that the flagellants emerge, a living, breathing river of penance. They do not merely pray, they perform. They have turned their suffering into a grand, terrifying theater. Twice a day, they gather in the square, stripped to the waist, their bodies mapped with the scabs and scars of a dozen cities. You watch them from the shadows of a doorway, mesmerized by the rhythmic, heavy thud of the leather thongs. Between the blows, they sing hymns in a low droning chant that seems to pull the very air from your lungs. It is a sound of absolute, agonizing certainty. They believe that by taking the stripes of Christ upon their own backs, they can balance the scales of divine wrath. Some of them have begun to claim they can forgive sins themselves, that the blood they spill on the cobbles is as holy as the wine in the chalice, a claim that makes the priests turn pale with fury and fear. As they pass, you see the true toll of their journey. Some can barely shuffle forward, their legs trembling, supported by the arms of brothers who are just as broken. The blood does not merely drip, it marks their path in a dark, gleaming trail across the cobblestones, a map of human desperation. You see the metal points of the whips catch the dying light of the sun, and for a moment, the world feels as if it is suspended in a single, vibrating note of pain. But then, the procession moves on. The chanting fades into the distance, becoming a low hum, then a whisper, then nothing at all. The square returns to its new, hollow silence. Let that silence wash over you now. The whips are gone. The chanting has ceased. The heavy-weighted history of that world is retreating, pulling back like a tide into the sea of the past. Breathe in deeply, feeling the stillness of your own home. Breathe out, releasing the tension in your shoulders, your neck, your hands. You are safe in the quiet of the present day. The cobblestones are far away. The dark trail is gone. There is only the soft, rhythmic sound of your own breathing. A prayer of a different kind. A prayer of peace. A prayer of rest. The crowd watching the flagellants is a sea of conflicting hearts. Around you, you hear the ragged sobbing of those moved to tears by the sight. Their faces turn toward the heavens in a frantic hope that this blood might finally be enough. Others kneel in the dust, their lips moving in silent, rapid-fire prayers. But you also see the faces of those who have seen too much, the skeletal, weary people who look on with eyes like hollowed-out caves. They aren't moved. They are simply exhausted by the spectacle of more pain in a world already overflowing with it. You feel a strange, cold numbness creeping over you. You want to respect their commitment, and you certainly feel the sharp sting of pity for their suffering. But there is a whisper in the back of your mind, a quiet, dangerous voice that suggests it is all pointless. You look at the dark, gleaming trails on the stones and wonder if God, seated on his throne of light, is truly moved by these dramatic gestures of agony. Is the creator of the stars truly waiting for more blood? The thought frightens you, a jolt of ice in your veins. You cross yourself with a trembling hand, the rough wool of your sleeve brushing your skin, and murmur a quick, desperate apology for your doubt. You have been told that doubt is the devil's work, a slow-acting poison meant to rot the soul from within. You push it down, burying it under the names of the protectors. New devotions bloom in the city like flowers growing in the cracks of a tomb. You see the image of Saint Sebastian everywhere, the martyr pierced by arrows, his suffering now a shield against the invisible arrows of the plague. You hear the name of Saint Roch, who walked the world with the fever in his bones and survived, becoming a beacon for those who feel the first shiver of heat in their blood. And Saint Christopher, the giant who carried the weight of the world, is invoked to guard the gates, protecting the city from the travelers who might carry the shadow in their bags. People have become walking reliquaries. You see them wearing small lid medals around their necks that clink softly as they move. They carry scraps of bone or fragments of ancient cloth, pressing them to their lips until the relics are worn smooth. Outside the city walls, a small stone chapel dedicated to Saint Roch has become a site of constant, quiet movement. Let yourself visualize that walk now. Imagine the long, winding path that leads out of the city gates. You see the pilgrims moving in a slow, steady line. Some are barefoot, their soles treading on the cool, damp earth, a soft, repetitive shush against the ground. They walk in silence, their minds focused on the rhythmic movement of their feet. The air is quieter out here, away from the heavy scents of the city. You can smell the scent of wild thyme and damp grass. The chapel ahead is a small gray silhouette against the fading light, a place of stillness and soft candle smoke. Let your own mind follow that path. Feel the rhythmic, grounding sensation of each step. The city is behind you. The noise is fading. The weights you carry are being left on the side of the road, one by one. You are moving toward a place of absolute quiet. Breathe in the cool, night air. Breathe out the heavy thoughts of the day. You are safe. You are walking toward rest. The chapel is empty, the candles are low, and the silence is a soft, warm embrace. The haze of the unseen. Does the pilgrimage help? It is impossible to say. You see some return from the chapel of Saint Roch with a new light in their eyes, and they remain healthy through the turning of the seasons. Others, despite their barefoot penance, are taken by the fever only days after their return. The survivors credit the saint for their deliverance, their voices filled with a shaky, relieved joy. The deaths are tucked away into the vast, dark drawer of God's inscrutable will. It is a world where every outcome is a sign, yet the signs are impossible to read. In this atmosphere of frantic uncertainty, the scapegoating intensifies, spreading like a second plague. People are no longer just searching for a cure. They are searching for a face to blame. The accusations against the Jews grow louder, fueled by ancient dormant hatreds. They say the wells have been poisoned with powders made from spiders and hearts. They say the very air is being curdled by secret rites. It matters not that the Jewish families are mourning their own children at the same rate as yours. It matters not that a poisoned well cannot cause the swellings in the armpit or the black spots on the skin. Fear and hatred are not looking for logic. They are looking for a release. Pilgrims sweep through the distant cities like a fire in a dry forest. You hear the rumors carried by travelers, stories of Jewish quarters being put to the torch, of smoke rising so thick it blots out the sun for days. Thousands of souls are lost in these nights of blind, frantic violence. You hear that some great lords and bishops try to bar the doors against the mobs, moved by conscience or the cold math of coin, but many others simply turn their heads, letting the madness run its course. You are not part of this violence. You live your life in the small, narrow streets of the poor, far from the gates of the Jewish quarter. You have never even spoken to a Jewish person. They are a mystery to you, people of a different book and a different tongue. But the stories find you. They drift into your home like the smell of burning wood. Part of you feels a deep, cold unease at the thought of it. Deep down, where your conscience speaks in a quiet voice, you know that killing neighbors seems wrong, even if they are different from you. But there is another part of you. The part that is tired and hungry and terrified for your children, that wonders in the dark. What if they are responsible? What if this is the price for the sun to come out again? It is a heavy thought, a dark cloud that settles over the city. But let that cloud begin to thin now. Imagine the smoke of the distant fires being carried away by a cool, rising wind. The rumors are fading into whispers. The whispers are becoming silence. Breathe in the stillness of your own room. The world of 1348 is receding, its violence and its fear becoming nothing more than shadows on a wall. You are here in a world that is safe and bright and at peace. The weight of that dark time is lifting off your shoulders. You have no one to blame, no one to fear. You are simply a traveler, coming home to the quiet sanctuary of sleep. You push the thoughts of the mobs and the fires away, folding them into the dark corners of your mind. They are too complicated, too troubling to hold while you try to survive. But the city is not done with its fear. It turns its eyes next toward the most vulnerable, the lepers. These poor souls have always lived on the ragged edges of your world, forced to dwell in isolated huts outside the city walls. You remember the sound of their bells, a lonely, rhythmic clink-clink, and the sharp wooden sound of their clappers warning the healthy to stay away. Now that warning sound has become a target. Rumors, as sharp as knives, fly through the market. They say the lepers are rubbing their sores on the door handles of the wealthy. They say they are poisoning the very bread in the ovens out of spite for their own suffering. It is nonsense, of course. Even with your limited knowledge, you can see that the slow, wasting disease of the leper is nothing like the sudden, blackened fire of the plague. But facts are like dry leaves in a storm. They have no weight when people are terrified. You hear of leper hospitals being put to the torch, the bells finally silenced by the roar of the flames. It is a horrible, jagged unfairness, yet it happens in the bright light of day, and no one raises a hand to stop it. The suspicion begins to seep into everything. Beggars who once sat by the church doors, counting on the charity of the faithful, now find only cold stones and turned heads. Even strangers, travelers who might have once been welcomed with a bowl of pottage and a place by the hearth, are seen as walking vessels of doom. Hospitality, which the priests always told you was a high Christian virtue, has become a dangerous gamble. The great oak doors of the churches, which once offered sanctuary to any weary traveler, are now barred from the inside with heavy iron bolts. Charity dries up like a stream in a drought. You find yourself clutching your own few coins tighter, not just out of greed, but out of fear. Why reach out to a beggar when his very breath might carry the shadow? Why touch a coin that may have passed through a house of death? The world is shrinking. It is becoming smaller and smaller, until it is just you, your family, and the four walls of your room. But in this shrinking, there is a strange, quiet safety. Let your focus settle on those walls now. Imagine the heavy iron bolt on your door, sliding into place with a solid, satisfying thud. The world outside, with its bells and its suspicions, is locked away, cannot reach you here. The air in your room is still. The shadows are soft. You are in your own sanctuary, far from the road and the rumors. Breathe in the silence. It is a clean silence. Breathe out the tension of the city. You are not a leper. You are not a beggar. You are not a judge. You are simply a soul at rest, drifting into the deep, dark peace of the night. The social fabric of the city, once a tight-knit tapestry of guilds, families, and parishes, begins to unravel like an old wool sleeve caught on a briar. Neighbors who once shared salt and stories now watch each other through cracked shutters with eyes full of sharp, jagged distrust. The basic laws of human decency, the unspoken promises we make to one another, are being rewritten in the dark. You hear the stories whispered at the well, voices low and fearful. They tell of a father in the next parish who locked his feverish child in an upstairs room and fled into the countryside, never looking back. They tell of wives who leave bread and water at a bedroom door, but refuse to cross the threshold to touch their husband's cooling forehead. Each story sits like a cold stone in your stomach. It feels like a violation of the soul, a betrayal of everything you were taught about love and duty. Yet, in the quiet of the night, as you listen to the rhythmic breathing of your own family, you feel the shadow of that same instinct. The urge to survive is not a thought. It is a pulse. It is a deep, ancient root that clings to the earth. You wonder, With a shudder, you try to hide what you would do if the choice were placed in your hands. You hope, you pray with every fiber of your being that you are never asked to choose between your heart and your light. In this atmosphere of broken trust, the world turns toward prophecy. When the present is unbearable and the past is a graveyard, people look frantically toward the future, desperate for a map out of the fog. Self-proclaimed prophets appear on street corners and in the hushed corners of taverns, their eyes bright with a strange, feverish light. They interpret the shape of the clouds. They read the patterns of birds in the winter sky. They calculate the end of days using the hidden numbers of the Bible. Their voices blend into a low, droning hum that fills the city. They speak of the great year, of the turning of the spheres, and of a time when the stars will align to wash the world clean. You listen to their predictions, not because you believe them, but because their certainty is a kind of comfort. It is a story with an ending, and any ending feels better than this endless gray middle. Let the voices of the prophets begin to fade now. Let their calculations and their signs drift away like wood smoke in a winter breeze. You don't need to know the future. You don't need to unravel the mysteries of the stars. Breathe slowly, in and out. The heavy choices of the 14th century are not yours to make. The unraveling fabric is mended. The doors are no longer locked in fear. You are in a place where love is safe, and loyalty is a given. Feel the warmth of your blankets, a physical weight that grounds you in the present. The stories of the past are becoming soft and blurry at the edges. They are losing their power to trouble you. You are sinking into the quiet, steady rhythm of the night, where there are no prophecies, only the deep, restorative promise of sleep. The shifting horizon. The year 1350 approaches with a heavy, expectant energy. It is a number of great symmetry, a clean mark in the ledger of time. After 3 long years of shadows and bells, the people of the city turn their eyes to the calendar with a desperate kind of logic. Surely, they reason, a God who created the world in 7 days and ordered the stars in their spheres must appreciate the symbolism of such a number. 1350 must be the year the tide turns. It must be the moment the great mortality finally exhales its last breath. But the year 1350 comes and goes, the seasons turning with their usual indifference. The winter frost melts into a spring that still carries the scent of rosemary and vinegar. The summer sun still shines on the red crosses painted on the doors. The prophets, undeterred, simply dip their quills and adjust their maps. Perhaps it is 1351. Perhaps the stars will align in 1352. The math of the heavens, they claim, is delicate, and a small error in calculation is only human. As the years stretch on, a new, more profound belief begins to take root in the hushed conversations of the city. If the plague will not end, perhaps it is because the world itself is coming to a conclusion. People look to the book of Revelation and see the images of their own streets reflected in the ancient parchment. The pale horse of death, the scales of famine, the silence of the heavens. They become convinced that they are the final generation, that the apocalypse is not a story from the past, but the air they are currently breathing. This belief settles over the city like a thick, insulating fog. It is simultaneously terrifying and strangely comforting. You feel the sharp edge of the terror when you think of the great judgment, of the books being opened and every hidden sin, every moment of doubt being brought into the light of the divine presence. But beneath that, there is a profound relief. If this is the end of the world, then the suffering finally has a shape. It's not random, it is the grand finale of human history. It means the struggle is almost over, and the dead will soon rise into a world where there is no more fever, no more hunger, and no more bells. Let the weight of that history settle into your pillows now. The year 1350 is a distant memory, a flicker of light in a long-past storm. You are not waiting for an apocalypse. You are not searching for signs in the stars. Breathe in, feeling the stillness of your room. Breathe out, letting the logic of the years drift away. The grand plan of the 14th century has long since been written, and the world did not end. It continued. It changed. It grew. You are a part of that continuation. The quiet, peaceful branch of a tree that survived the gale. Feel the safety of being at the end of the story, in a place where the sun always rises and the nights are for nothing but rest. The shadows of the four horsemen are gone. There is only the soft, dark velvet of the night and the rhythmic, steady peace of your own heart. You find yourself half believing in the end of the world sometimes. When you stand at your window and look out over the silent rooftops, where no smoke rises from chimneys and no voices carry on the wind, it is easy to succumb to the weight of it. You see the massive, scarred mounds of the plague pits beyond the walls and the shuttered shops of men you once knew, and the conclusion feels inescapable. It doesn't feel like a metaphor. It feels like the literal physical closing of a book. The ink is dry, the pages are full, and the cover is being drawn shut. But then, another season turns. The frost of 1351 melts away, and the plague, that terrible, invisible tide, finally begins to recede. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no sudden trumpet blast to announce its departure. Instead, it simply thins. The dead carts creak less often in the night. The red crosses on the doors begin to fade under the sun and rain. Life, stubborn and quiet like the grass pushing through the cobblestones, continues. It is not the same life you knew before the shadow fell. It is a world that is emptier, quieter, and fundamentally changed. The old hierarchies are broken. The old certainties are gone, and everyone who remains carries a landscape of loss within them. But the sun still rises over the cathedral spire. The air, once heavy with the scent of vinegar and decay, now carries the scent of damp earth and blooming hawthorn. The world did not end. It simply transformed. Let your mind rest now. Let these heavy thoughts of survival and history settle like dust in a room where the door has been gently closed. You have traveled through the darkest years of human memory, and you have come out the other side. Feel the absolute safety of your bed. The 14th century is retreating now, its bells and its sorrows becoming a faint, distant hum that eventually vanishes into the silence. You are far, far away from that time of fear. You are in a place where the air is clean, the night is peaceful, and there are no choices left to make. Breathe deeply, in through your nose, hold it for a moment of perfect stillness, and out through your mouth, letting every muscle in your body go limp. Your pillows are soft. Your blankets are a warm, protective cocoon. You are witnessing the end of the story, and the end is peace. The history is finished. The world is quiet. You are safe. The great stagnation of time. The plague does not strike like a sudden, sharp lightning bolt. It would be easier, perhaps, if it were a single catastrophic winter. A storm that breaks quickly, leaving the survivors to step out into a new morning and begin the work of rebuilding. Instead, the great mortality is a slow, heavy fog that refuses to lift. Months stretch into long, hollow years. Time itself begins to lose its shape, unraveling at the edges until the days bleed into one another without a seam. Routine, the heartbeat of the city, has faltered. The hours used to be marked by the rhythmic opening and closing of shop shutters, the predictable bustle of the market, and the joyous anticipation of saints' days and festivals. Now, those markers have vanished. You no longer work by the sun's steady climb. You work in short, frantic bursts, or not at all. The markets operate like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without a schedule. The great feast days, which once brought color and music to the gray streets, pass in a heavy, unremarked silence. You find yourself losing track of the names of the days. They are all simply today, and today is a quiet room. The seasons change, but they feel like a play performed on a stage where the actors have forgotten their lines. Spring arrives with its pale green buds and its promise of rebirth, and you know you should be out in the dirt, planting seeds for a future you hope to see. But the energy is gone, drained by the constant weight of the shadow. Summer follows, bringing a long golden daylight that should be filled with labor and laughter. Instead, the heat feels heavy and stagnant, and the extra hours of light only serve to illuminate the empty spaces in the street. Fall brings its usual sharp chill, the smell of wood smoke and the turning of the leaves. But the harvest is a thin and lonely thing. Then winter returns, its harsh, biting cold driving everyone inside, sealing the doors and windows against a new wave of death that travels on the icy wind. Each year is a mirror of the one before, a slow, repetitive cycle of waiting and surviving. Let your own sense of time begin to blur now. You don't need to know the hour or the day. You don't need to plan for the seasons ahead. Feel the world slowing down and around you, like a great clock that has been left unwound. The frantic pace of the day is gone. The pressure to achieve, to produce, to act. It is all dissolving into the soft darkness of your room. Breathe in, feeling the cool, steady rhythm of the present moment. Breathe out, letting the months and years of the past drift away. The long duration is over. The seasons of fear have passed. You are in a place where time is not a burden, but a gentle, infinite sea. You are drifting on that sea now, moving away from the shore of history and into the deep, quiet waters of sleep. The world is still. The time is now. And now is for rest. This realization that the plague has not only stolen lives, but has also reshaped the very nature of childhood, is perhaps the most poignant part of the long stagnation. For a sleep narration, we will focus on the quiet, steady movements of the children and the soft, repetitive rhythm of their play, guiding you into a state of deep, protective calm. The somber peace of the hearth. The plague ebbs and flows like a dark tide, its rhythm dictated by forces you cannot see. You hear the elders debate it in hushed tones over the fences. Some swear the summer heat cooks the pestilence into a more lethal broth, while others argue that the biting winter cold is the true enemy, forcing everyone into cramped, airless rooms where the sickness leaps from breath to breath. Both theories feel like truth. Neither offers a shield. The world has become a place where even the weather is watched with suspicion. In the midst of this long, gray middle, your children are growing. Your son is 12 now, his limbs stretching long and thin like a sapling in a crowded forest. He carries himself with a forced gravity, his shoulders squared as he tries to fill the space left by men who are no longer there. Your daughter at 10 has become a creature of silence. They have seen more of the veil between life and death than any child should, and it has settled behind their eyes like a permanent shadow. They are somber, watchful, and ancient in a way that breaks your heart. They have stopped asking the questions that children usually ask. They no longer wonder why the birds sing or where the sun goes at night. They have learned, with a quiet and terrible clarity, that the adults in their world are just as lost as they are. Instead, they have mastered the rituals of survival. They avoid the shuttered houses without being told. They wash their hands with a frantic, rhythmic devotion when there is water to spare. They pray with an automatic, hollow precision. One afternoon, you find your daughter tucked into a corner of the hearth, playing with a small rag doll. You expect to see her dressing it or taking it on an imaginary journey. But the scene she is carefully constructing is a funeral. She has cleared a small space in the dust, and she is laying the doll down with a gentle, practiced hand. She murmurs the prayers for the dead, words she has heard too many times, her voice a soft, melodic drone. Let that sound, the low, steady murmur of her voice, become the soundtrack for your own rest. It is a sad game, yes, but it is also a quiet one. It is a scene of order and care in a world that feels chaotic. Focus now on the warmth of the hearth in that room. Imagine the orange glow of the embers and the way the light dances on the stone walls. Your children are safe. They are near you. The doors are barred, and the world outside is distant and cold. You don't need to have the answers for them tonight. You only need to be their shelter. Breathe in the scent of the wood smoke and the dry, warm air. Breathe out the worries of their futures and their pasts. You are here, In the present, the doll is at rest. The prayers have been said. The house is falling into a deep, heavy silence. Let your own mind settle into that same dust-mote stillness. You are drifting toward a sleep that is deep and protective. A sleep that mends the spirit. The story is fading. The shadows are soft. You are safe. The sight of your daughter's funeral game breaks something inside you. A soft, silent fracture you can't quite name. But you don't reach out to stop her. You understand, in a way that transcends words, that the mind must find a way to carry what the heart cannot. This is her way of speaking to the silence, of making sense of the shadows that have filled her young life. You let her play, her small voice a steady, rhythmic hum in the corner of the room. Your husband has drifted into a similar, protective silence. He was always a man of few words, but now he moves through the house like a ghost of the man he once was. He works when the world asks for his labor, he eats what the hearth provides, and he sleeps with the heavy, dreamless exhaustion of a soldier. When he holds you at night, his touch is so gentle it almost aches, as if he fears that any pressure might cause the fragile glass of your shared life to shatter. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps you are all fragile now, held together by the thin, strong threads of sheer will. You have all become different people. The fire of the plague has burned away the unnecessary, leaving behind something harder, quieter, and entirely focused on the simple, singular goal of survival. Love has not vanished, but it has changed its shape. It is no longer found in grand gestures or sweet words. It is found in the fact that you are still here, standing at the door, waiting for one another. To stay alive is your highest act of love. To not abandon each other even when the world is screaming to run is the ultimate devotion. Beyond your walls, the scale of the loss is a hollow canyon that defies comprehension. You cannot see the numbers, but you can feel the absence. It is in the way the wind sounds as it rushes through the empty windows of the neighboring streets. It is in the stories of the lost villages, places where every hearth has gone cold, where the buildings stand like skeletal remains, and where the fields are slowly being reclaimed by the creeping emerald green of the forest. The world is becoming a wilder, lonelier place. Let the vastness of that quiet landscape settle over you now. Imagine those empty fields, where the grass is long and soft, waving in a gentle evening breeze. There is no sound there, but the rustle of the leaves and the distant, lonely call of a bird. It is a place of profound peace, a place where the earth is resting, waiting for a new beginning. Breathe in the coolness of that distant forest. Breathe out the tension in your arms, your chest, your weary mind. You have done the work of survival. You have shown your devotion by remaining. Now, it is time to let go of the vigil. Your family is safe. Your house is quiet. The world is resting, and you may rest with it. The story of the great mortality is closing, its heavy pages turning one last time. The silence of the city is a physical thing now, a heavy, muffled blanket that has settled over the stones. Where once there was a cacophony of street cries, clattering hooves, and the laughter of neighbors, there is now only the vast, ringing space of the gone. You've stopped counting the empty windows. The math of loss has become too large for a single mind to hold. You no longer try to recite the names of the missing, for fear that if you started, you would never be able to stop. You see the survivors moving through this new hollowed-out world like ghosts in a landscape of ruins. There is the woman you see at the market stalls, once part of a loud, sprawling family of 7. Now, she buys a single loaf of bread, a single onion. She moves with a mechanical, somber precision, her eyes fixed on a point far beyond the horizon. She is not living so much as she is continuing. She carries the weight of her entire lineage in the quiet, steady rise and fall of her chest. Then there are those whose spirits broke before their bodies did. You pass the man in the square who carries on long, animated conversations with the air, gesturing to a wife and children who have been in the plague pits for a year. No one mocks him. No one tries to lead him away. In a world that has lost its reason, his madness is simply a more honest reflection of the truth. Everyone carries a version of that same internal fracture. His is just the one that cries out. A new kind of face has emerged in the city, the face of the survivor. It is a look of hollowed cheeks and sharpened features, as if the sheer pressure of the last few years has melted the soft parts of humanity away. The eyes are the most striking. They are haunted, deep-set, and filled with a permanent, vibrating wariness. It is the look of someone who has stared into the abyss and is waiting for it to blink. One evening, as you lean over a basin of still water to splash your face, you see that same reflection staring back at you. The haunted eyes, the tension in the jaw, the thinness of the spirit. You wear the history of the great mortality on your own skin. In the wake of so much loss, the city has split into two different worlds. On one side, there are those who have become reckless, their fear having curdled into a defiant, frantic energy. You hear them in the taverns late at night, their laughter too loud, their songs too sharp. They gamble with coins they may not live to spend and drink, as if to drown the very memory of the bells. They have looked at the randomness of the plague and decided that if the end is inevitable, they will meet it with a glass in their hand and a fire in their blood. On the other side are the shadows, those who have become obsessively, painfully careful. They move through the streets like wraiths, pulling their cloaks tight around their faces, refusing to touch a wall or a coin or a hand. They have retreated into the small, airless bubbles of their homes, trying to build a fortress out of silence and distance. You see them watching from behind their shutters, their eyes wide with a terror that never sleeps. But you have found a place in between. You are neither the flame nor the shadow. You have found a way to walk the narrow path of the middle ground. You are careful, yes. You know the weight of the air, and you know the danger of the crowd, but you are not paralyzed. You venture out for the things your family needs. You let the sun touch your face. You speak to your neighbors from across the street, acknowledging the shared burden you both carry. You are trying to maintain a semblance of the world that was, even as you acknowledge that the world that is has changed forever. There is a quiet, steady strength in this balance. It is the strength of the willow that bends in the gale but does not snap. It is the strength of the heart that continues to beat, even when the rhythm of the world has faltered. Let that steady, balanced rhythm become your focus now. Imagine yourself sitting by your window as the sun begins to set. The reckless songs in the distance are fading, becoming a low, indistinct hum. The fearful shutters are all closed. The city is settling into its evening layer of blue and gray. You are in the center of it all, safe, calm, and balanced. Breathe in the quiet of this middle ground. Breathe out the extremes of the world. You don't need to be reckless, and you don't need to be afraid. You are simply present. You are here, in the soft, cradling arms of the night. The bubbles of the city are dissolving, and in their place is a single, vast ocean of rest. The water is warm. The stars are fixed and constant. Your work for the day is done. Your vigilance is no longer required. The path you walk today has led you here, to this bed, to this moment of absolute equilibrium. The struggle for bread remains a constant rhythmic tide in your life. You have learned to live with a hunger that has no voice, only a dull, steady pulse. You have sat in the dim light of the hearth, sharing a loaf of bread made from ground acorns, dark, bitter, and heavy. It is a meal born of necessity, sitting like a warm stone in your stomach, but it fills the hollow space and brings a quiet, leaden peace to the body. In the silence of the room, you listen to your children's breathing grow slow and deep, the growl of their stomachs finally stilled by the simple, grounding weight of being full. But as the months stretch into years, the world around you begins to change in ways you hadn't expected. The city, once so cramped that your breath always seemed to belong to someone else, is beginning to open up. With the thinning of the crowds, the air feels lighter, as if the buildings themselves are stepping back to give you room. You have moved from your cramped, dark corner into a better room, one with a window that catches the morning sun and walls of sturdy stone that hold the day's warmth. The air here is cleaner, moving in a soft, gentle current through the open shutters. The landlord, a man who once would have ignored your very existence, now greets you with a wary respect. He is grateful for the sound of life in his halls, and the rent is a shadow of what it once was. Even the coins in your husband's hand feel different now. When he finds work, he returns with more than he ever earned in the years before the shadow. The masters and the lords cry out that it is against the law to pay such wages, but their laws are like old parchment crumbling in the wind. The simple truth is that the hands that can plow a field or mend a wall are now precious. And for the first time in your life, your labor has a value that matches its weight. Let the sense of this new quiet space settle around you now. Imagine your new room. See the way the moonlight spills across the floorboards in a long silver rectangle. There is no one on the other side of the wall. There is no noise from the street below. You have more room to stretch your limbs, more air to fill your lungs. The world is less crowded, less hurried, less loud. Breathe in the spaciousness of this moment. Breathe out the memory of the struggle. The bitterness of the acorn bread is gone, replaced by the deep, heavy comfort of a full stomach. The anxiety of the rent has dissolved into the coolness of the stone walls. You are in a place of expansion and quiet. You are in a place where your presence is valued and your rest is earned. The city is sleeping. The world is vast and still. You are drifting into a sleep that is as open and as peaceful as a field under the stars. This realization, the quiet weight of the objects you now hold, and the heavy silence of the bells, brings us to the final threshold of our journey. For sleep, we will focus on the cool touch of the metal and the rhythmic, fading vibrations of the city, leading you into a state of deep, meditative surrender. The weight of the silent bell. In the quiet of your new room, you look at the small collection of things you have gathered. There is a pewter cup that catches the light of the moon, 2 smooth wooden bowls, and a knife with a blade that is still sharp and true. These are small treasures, scavenged from the edges of abandoned lives, or bought for a pittance from those fleeing the city. They are improvements, certainly, small comforts in a world that has been stripped bare, but they carry a cold, invisible weight. You feel the flicker of guilt when you lift a dead woman's bowl to your lips. You feel a shadow across your heart when you realize you are sleeping in a space that once echoed with the laughter of a family, now resting in the earth. You are benefiting from the silence. You are thriving in the space left by the gone. But as you watch the embers in the hearth, you realize that to refuse these things would be a different kind of waste. The world moves on, and it asks you to move with it. You push the guilt down, letting it settle like silt at the bottom of a well, and you carry on. The air of the city has changed. The church bells, which once dictated every heartbeat of your day, the call to prayer, the opening of the market, the tolling of the hour, ring less frequently now. Many of those whose hands pulled the ropes are gone, and those who remain are weary. The bells have taken on a new symbolic weight. Their silence is a physical presence, a vast, ringing echo that fills the streets more loudly than the bronze ever did. When you do hear a bell now, it is a single slow note that seems to vibrate through the very marrow of your bones. You pause, automatically, your hands finding the familiar shape of the cross, and you murmur a prayer. It is no longer a prayer for a specific name or a particular face. There are too many names now to recite. It is a general prayer, a soft exhaled wish for all the lost souls, all the suffering, all the silent households. It is a prayer that has no beginning and no end. Let that single fading bell note lead you into the night. Imagine the vibration of the bell as it ripples through the air, becoming softer and softer with every second. It is moving away from you, traveling over the rooftops, over the city walls, and out into the vast, dark countryside. Breathe in the cool, metallic scent of the pewter cup. Breathe out the weight of the silver and the stone. The guilt is gone. The silence is not an absence. It is a rest. You are holding the things you need, and the things you don't need are being carried away by the wind. You are in a sanctuary of your own making. The bells are still. The prayers are finished. The world has said everything it needs to say for today. You are safe. You are at peace. You are sinking into a sleep that is as deep and as resonant as the heart of an ancient bell, resting in the high, dark tower of the night. You've stopped trying to remember everyone who died. The list is too long. Instead, you remember the world as it was, crowded, noisy, full of life and motion. That world is gone. You're living in its ghost. This is the final exhale. The long, jagged breath the world has been holding for years is finally being released. For our final transition into rest, we will focus on the soft return of color and the rhythmic, peaceful resumption of the everyday, guiding you into a sleep that marks the beginning of something new. The soft return of the world. Eventually, against all logic and the weight of despair, the dying begins to slow. It does not happen with a trumpet blast or a sudden clearing of the sky. It happens in the quiet spaces, the weeks that pass without the sound of a heavy cart on the cobblestones, the months where no new red crosses appear on the doors of your street. It is a slow, gradual fading, like a fire burning down to a gentle warmth, or a thick fog being carried away by a steady, invisible breeze. In your neighborhood, the silence of the sick room is replaced by the silence of the morning. 1 month passes, then 2. You see your neighbors leaning out of their windows, their faces pale and thin, but their eyes are no longer fixed on the earth. You begin to allow yourself the dangerous luxury of hope, a tentative, fragile feeling that blooms like a winter flower in the cracks of the stone. The news from the distant horizon is still heavy. You hear of a village 20 miles away where the shadow still lingers, or a port town where the ships remain anchored in a silent harbor. But here, in your immediate world, the catastrophe has halted. The relief is profound, but it is also strange. You had become so accustomed to the presence of death, had adapted your walk, your talk, and your very thoughts to its constant pressure, that its absence feels unreal. You find yourself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the wind to shift, for the bells to begin their heavy tolling once more. But the bells do not ring for the dead. Instead, they begin to ring for the living. Slowly, carefully, the people emerge from their fortresses of isolation. The streets begin to fill again, not with the frantic, clattering crowds of the years before, but with a quieter, more deliberate movement. The markets reopen, and the air is filled with the scent of fresh bread and the sharp, clean smell of new timber. Merchants venture out with their wares, their voices tentative as they call out to the passers-by. Life is resuming, but it is a different life. The world has been thinned, its edges softened by loss, its foundations shifted by the storm. You walk through the streets and see the space where things used to be, but you also see the sunlight hitting the stones in a way you never noticed before. The world is quieter, wider, and filled with a strange new potential. Let that sense of a new morning settle over you now. Imagine the sun rising over the rooftops of your city. The air is cool and clear. There is no fear in the wind. You are standing at your window, watching the first light touch the steeple of the church. The ordeal is over. The survival is complete. You have walked through the valley, and you have come out into a wide green meadow. Breathe in the freshness of this new world. Breathe out the last of the old shadows. You don't need to be watchful anymore. You don't need to wait for the storm. The world has turned, and it has brought you here to this moment of absolute safety. Your family is sleeping. Your heart is steady. Your life is your own once more. The story is done. The pages are closed. The history is at rest. You are safe. You are warm. You are sleeping in the light of a new and peaceful dawn. The population loss is staggering. Your city might have held 15,000 people before the plague. Now perhaps 7,000 remain. Maybe fewer. More than half gone. This transforms everything. Economics, social structure, power relationships. all of it shifts. Labor is scarce and valuable now. Workers have leverage they've never had before. Your husband can demand better wages and actually receive them. Some laborers even negotiate contracts specifying their pay, their hours, their conditions. This is revolutionary. The authorities hate it. They pass laws trying to freeze wages at pre-plague levels, trying to force workers to accept whatever employers offer. But enforcement is difficult when employers desperately need workers and workers can simply walk away and find another employer. Land is abundant. Fields lie empty, with no one to farm them. Lords who once had tenants competing for every scrap of land now find themselves with empty holdings and no income. They're forced to offer better terms, lower rents, greater freedom to attract tenants. Serfs, bound to the land by law and custom for generations, discover they have options. If their lord treats them poorly, they can flee to a different manor where the lord is more desperate. Some lords try to track down and punish runaways, but there aren't enough enforcers, and other lords are happy to look the other way if it means getting workers. The whole feudal structure begins to crack. Not collapse, not immediately, but definite fissures appear. The plague killed indiscriminately, but its aftermath empowers the lower classes in ways that would have been unimaginable before. You feel this shift personally. You're no longer quite so desperate. You have choices, limited but real. If one employer is abusive, you can find another. If your landlord raises the rent unreasonably, you can move. Empty buildings are everywhere. This is strange and disorienting. Your parents and grandparents never had choices. They endured whatever circumstances gave them. But you can make decisions, small ones, about how you live. At the same time, the world feels emptier and sadder. Streets you walk daily now echo with absence. Houses stand vacant, gardens gone to weeds, shutters banging in the wind. Each one represents lost lives, a family, gone. Neighbors you knew, vanished. The social fabric has tears in it. Communities that once knew everyone now have gaps. The woman who sold bread, dead. The man who told stories in the tavern, dead. The children who played together, half of them dead. Every interaction, every walk through familiar streets reminds you of absence. Trauma lingers. People are changed by what they've experienced and witnessed. Some become bitter, angry at God or fate or other humans. Some become hedonistic, determined to extract pleasure from whatever time remains. Some become philosophical, accepting and calm in a way that feels almost inhuman. Your family survived intact, all four of you, which is extraordinarily fortunate. You know this. You're grateful for it daily, but you're all marked by the experience. Your children are strange old children. They understand death in ways children shouldn't. They're practical and unsentimental. They don't complain about hunger or cold or hardship because they know how much worse things could be. Your marriage has deepened, in a way. You and your husband have been through apocalypse together and remained. There is a bond there, unspoken but real. Also, exhaustion. Also, a certain emotional flatness, as if all feeling has been worn away by too much grief. The church struggles to explain what happened. If this was God's judgment, why did it end before everyone died? If it was a test, who passed? What was learned? Various explanations are offered. God's mercy tempered his wrath. The prayers of the faithful moved him to compassion. The worst sinners were purged, and now humanity can start fresh. None of these explanations quite satisfy, but they're what's available. Church attendance remains high. People are still scared. The plague might return. Who knows? Best to stay on God's good side. Also, many people made vows during the plague. If I survive, I'll attend Mass daily. I'll give to the poor. I'll go on pilgrimage. Now they're obligated to follow through. Pilgrimages become extremely popular. People who survived feel they owe God something, or maybe they're seeking meaning in their survival. Routes to major shrines, Canterbury, Santiago de Compostela, Rome, Jerusalem, fill with pilgrims. all wearing the badges and symbols of their destinations, walking hundreds or thousands of miles to give thanks or seek forgiveness, or simply process what happened. You consider going on pilgrimage yourself. It feels appropriate, somehow, but it's expensive, even with better wages, and dangerous. Bandits prey on pilgrims. Also, who would care for your children? So you stay, but you understand the impulse. Art and literature begin to reflect the plague experience. Poems about death, paintings of skeletal figures, dance macabre scenes where death leads everyone, pope, king, merchant, peasant, in a dance. Everyone is equal before death. The message goes. No one escapes. This is both morbid and comforting. Morbid for obvious reasons. Comforting because it validates your experience. Yes, you think, yes, that's what it was like. The randomness, the universality, the absolute equality of death. Some people emerge from the plague with renewed faith. They've been tested and survived, which they interpret as divine favor. They're more devout, more certain, more committed to religious life. Others emerge with shaken or destroyed faith. How can you believe in a loving God after watching children die screaming? How can you trust in divine justice when the virtuous perished and the wicked survived? These doubts are rarely spoken aloud, too dangerous, too heretical. But they exist, corrosive and persistent. You're somewhere in the middle as usual. You still believe in God, still pray, still attend Mass. But your faith is quieter now, less certain, more questioning. You don't expect answers anymore. You don't expect fairness. You just persist. Years pass. The immediate aftermath becomes simply after. A new normal establishes itself. People born after the worst of the plague have no memory of the world before. For them, the empty streets and abundant land and better wages are just how things are. But for you, for those who remember, the world is always divided into before and after. Before the plague and after the plague. Before the dying and after the dying. The boundary between these periods is absolute, a wall of corpses separating two different realities. Breathe deeply now. Feel the distance between you and this history. Centuries separate you from these events. The people who suffered through them are long dead, their bones dust, their names mostly forgotten. You're just visiting their story, just witnessing, safe in your own time. Reflection. What does history remember about the Black Death? What lessons emerge from this catastrophe? The immediate lesson is simple. Life is fragile. Civilization is fragile. Everything you take for granted, social order, economic systems, the expectation that tomorrow will resemble today, can collapse with shocking speed. But the longer lesson is more subtle. Humans are resilient. Even after losing half the population, European society didn't disappear. It changed, evolved, adapted, but it continued. The plague transformed Europe in ways both obvious and subtle. Labor shortages led to higher wages and more freedom for workers. The old feudal certainties cracked. New economic arrangements emerged. The seeds of future social revolutions were planted in the plague's devastated soil. Culture changed too. Art became more concerned with death, more focused on human mortality. Literature grew more skeptical, more questioning. The automatic acceptance of authority, church, nobility, tradition, weakened slightly. These changes took generations to fully unfold. If you're living through the immediate aftermath, you don't see the grand historical trends. You just see empty buildings and traumatized neighbors, and a world that feels irreparably broken. But slowly, incredibly, life returns. Not the same life. The world before the plague is gone forever. But a new world emerges, built on the ruins of the old. Gardens are replanted. Shops reopen. Children are born. Markets bustle again, though never quite as crowded as before. The streets fill with new sounds, laughter, argument, commerce, all the ordinary noise of human life. The churches remain full, but the sermons change slightly. Less about punishment, perhaps, more about mercy. Less certainty about who deserves suffering, more humility about divine plans. The plague shook everyone's faith, even the clergy's, though few admit it openly. You grow older. Your children become adults. Your son becomes a laborer like his father, but earns twice the wages. Your daughter marries a craftsman, a real step up in status. She'll have a better life than you did. This pleases you more than you can express. You become a grandmother. This seems miraculous. You survived the plague. Your children survived. Now there's a new generation, babies who will never know the world before, who will grow up in this changed, emptier, slightly better world. When you hold your granddaughter, you think about all the children who didn't survive, all the potential grandmothers who died before seeing this moment. You're lucky. You know this. The weight of that luck, that survival, sits heavy on your shoulders. You tell your grandchildren stories sometimes about the plague years, not to frighten them, but so they know. So they understand why the city has empty quarters, why there are so many abandoned buildings, why certain streets feel haunted. They listen with wide eyes, trying to imagine their familiar world full of death and fear. They can't quite grasp it. They're too young, and it's too removed from their experience. But they try, and that's something. You're older now, your body worn by years of labor and hardship. Your hands are gnarled, your back bent, your breath short. You've lived through the worst catastrophe in European history and emerged on the other side. When you die, not yet, but someday, you'll be buried in consecrated ground with proper ceremony. The graveyards, once full to bursting, have space again. You'll have a Christian burial, prayers for your soul, your name remembered by your children and grandchildren. This is more than many got during the plague. This is a peaceful death, an earned rest after a hard life. You've survived, endured, persisted through unimaginable difficulty. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate lesson. Humans endure. Against plague, against catastrophe, against the seeming end of the world, they survive and rebuild. Not unchanged, never unchanged, but continuing nonetheless. Conclusion. Dawn after darkness. The bells have fallen silent. Not forever, but for now. The tolling that marked death after death after death has stopped. The bells ring now for hours and masses, for weddings occasionally, for life returning slowly to a wounded world. The streets begin to stir again. Not crowded, not like before, but no longer empty. People walk with purpose, to work, to market, to church. Children play, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The city remembers how to be a city. Gardens bloom in unexpected places. Flowers grow in the courtyard of an abandoned house. Seeds planted by no one, or perhaps by someone long dead, finally coming to fruition. Nature reclaims spaces humans left empty. Vines crawl up walls. Trees sprout in collapsed buildings. The world is healing itself. You stand at your window one morning, watching the sun rise over the rooftops. The same rooftops you've looked at for years, but the light seems different now. Softer, perhaps. Or maybe you're just seeing it differently, with eyes that have witnessed too much and found that somehow, impossibly, you can still find beauty. The air feels lighter. Is it actually lighter, or do you just notice it more after breathing the heavy death-scented air of the plague years? Does it matter? The sensation is real. You breathe in deeply, and the air is sweet with morning, with possibility, with the faint promise that perhaps the worst is behind you. The plague might return. You know this. It could come back next year, or the year after. Diseases don't simply vanish. But for now, today, this moment, you're alive. Your family is alive. The sun is rising. The birds are singing, having returned to a quieter city where they can actually be heard. You think about everything you've lost. Friends, neighbors, the woman who sold bread, the man who told stories, your mother who died just before the plague began and was thus spared its horrors. The loss is enormous, a hole in the world that will never be completely filled. But you also think about what remains. Your husband still strong despite everything. Your children, grown now, surviving, building their own lives. Your granddaughter, who represents the future, a possibility that life goes on despite catastrophe. The sun climbs higher. The city wakes fully. You can hear the market beginning, vendors calling out their wares, customers haggling, all the ordinary business of living resuming its rhythms. You step outside. The street is no longer mud and filth. The city, with fewer people and more resources, has actually made some improvements. Cobblestones have been laid. Drainage has been improved. Small changes, but meaningful. Your neighbor nods to you. She's a survivor too, one of the few left from the old days. No words are necessary. You both know what you've been through. You both know what it means to still be standing. The church bells ring, marking the morning hour. The sound is clear and bright, carrying across the rooftops, echoing off stone walls. It's a sound of order, of continuity, of time moving forward rather than standing still in an endless present of suffering. You have work to do today. Spinning perhaps, or helping in the market, or tending your small garden. Ordinary work. Precious, ordinary work. The kind of work that means you're alive, that society functions, that the world continues. You take another breath. The air really does feel lighter. Or maybe you're lighter, having survived something you weren't sure you could survive. Maybe grief, when carried long enough, becomes a different kind of weight. Still heavy, but familiar, manageable. The sun rises over rooftops, still scarred by loss. But they're standing. The buildings remain, shelter for the living. The streets persist, pathways for continued journeys. The city survives, wounded but alive. And you breathe in, and the air fills your lungs, and you are here. Present, surviving, enduring. The world, somehow, begins again. Rest now. Let this history settle into the past where it belongs. Let your breathing slow, deep, and even. Feel the comfort of your bed, the safety of your room, the distance between you and this long-ago suffering. The plague ended. Europe recovered. Life continued. Different, but continuing. And you, safe in your own time, can close your eyes knowing that even the worst catastrophes eventually pass. Even the darkest night ends with dawn. Even the most terrible suffering is survived by someone. And the sun rises, again and again, over a world that refuses to stop trying. Sleep now. Rest. You've witnessed enough. The story is over. The dawn has come, and it's time for us to say goodbye and good night. Tomorrow we rise once again to face our daily struggles. But we do so knowingly that we, as a species, can overcome almost anything. Sleep now, my friends, for the night is dark and full of shadows. Sleep now, my friends, though the morning light is soon upon us. Sleep now and rise anew, full of vigor and of strength renewed. My name is Alex, and I have been your voice in the night. But now I leave you. I leave you to your own, to sleep the night away. And I hope I see you all again, very soon, in the next one.